Story 1.
My wife wanted to cheat by opening our marriage, so I left her, ghosted her, and filed for divorce. As I headed to work, I couldn't help but think about a conversation my wife had brought up during dinner the previous evening. It wasn't the first time we had discussed such topics, but lately, it seemed to be on her mind more frequently, and I was curious about why it had become so important to her. She encouraged me to recall how many women I had been involved with before we committed to each other exclusively. Additionally, she wanted to know if I still had any lingering fantasies about my past partners, or if I ever thought about them during our intimate moments. After 5 years of marriage, the simple answer was that my wife and I had built a relationship based on trust, respect, love, intimacy, and friendship. Even though it wasn't perfect, I believed these elements were essential for any successful relationship, and I assumed Molly shared the same perspective. It felt like we were living a dream life: stable income, a strong marriage, a beautiful home, the means for vacations, and the enjoyment of fine dining, wines, and entertainment. I am William Harrison, but my friends call me Billy. My wife's name is Molly. During my childhood, I stayed in shape by playing football and hockey year-round and dedicating time to weightlifting. Nowadays, I maintain my fitness through running and actively participating in the adult soccer league, occasionally indulging in pond hockey. My beloved wife Molly, with her radiant eyes, flawless complexion, and lovely lips, possessed the ability to captivate anyone with her smile and engaging conversations on a wide range of topics. Her genuine interest in others made her an exceptional listener and an impartial advisor. Though her friendly demeanor might have seemed like flirting or casual behavior at times, it never bothered me because Molly knew how to keep conversations respectful and appropriate. In my eyes, Molly had a near-perfect character, with the only occasional annoyance being a minor flaw that occasionally led to emotional discussions between us. While these disagreements seldom escalated into full-blown arguments, Molly's unwavering determination, once she made up her mind, could make it challenging for me to change her perspective, especially in matters without clear scientific evidence. Both of us got married shortly after college, having exclusively dated during our final 2 years of university. It's safe to say that Molly didn't have much experience in choosing partners before our marriage. In contrast, I led a more adventurous life during high school and the first 2 years of college, exploring relationships with various women. By the age of 19, I considered myself fortunate. When Molly inquired about my ability to satisfy her, I openly acknowledged the influence of my previous experiences. This revelation made her feel envious as she realized the missed opportunities and diverse encounters she had not had. I worked as a mechanical engineer at Abbott Labs, where I designed and tested injection molding components for medical devices. My latest hobby involves restoring a 2005 Winnebago B-Class van, while Molly excelled in her career as a CPA, holding a coveted position at a top accounting and consulting firm. Her job provided a stable income with manageable stress levels, occasionally involving business trips where she accompanied junior accountants during company audits. These trips ensured comprehensive coverage and adherence to the organization's principles of exceptional customer service and detailed reporting. In the past month, Molly embarked on several trips with a recent graduate named Andrew, who had started a 3-year journey to become a certified public accountant CPA. This path involved qualifications and rigorous tests. After their initial trip, Molly briefly mentioned Andrew but had not brought him up since. As our life progressed, I couldn't help but notice subtle changes in Molly's behavior and communication with me. She became less energetic, sociable, and open in our interactions. Additionally, Molly started coming home from work later than usual on multiple occasions in recent weeks. During a passionate moment, Molly ardently undressed me and led me to our bed. Throughout this intimate moment, I sensed an intensified desire in her. After making love, I went downstairs to cook, planning to address the issue when she joined me in the kitchen. When Molly eventually came downstairs and took her seat, I mustered the courage to broach the topic that needed discussion. Encouraging Molly to express her thoughts first, I reassured her of my unwavering love and trust. Molly responded playfully, which heightened my anxiety. She made light of the serious tone of our conversation, joking about how discussions that began with "we need to talk" often signaled the end of a marriage. Dismissing my worry, Molly assured me that there was nothing negative. In fact, she believed what she had to share would bring joy to both of us. Struggling to articulate my thoughts, I continued expressing my concern about a shift in our relationship. Molly interrupted, referring to our recent intimate encounter and questioning why I felt that way. I clarified that it wasn't what I meant, but my anxiety persisted. Since Molly had brought up our passionate moment, I couldn't help but inquire about what had sparked such intense passion that she practically tore off my clothes. Molly's demeanor instantly changed, showing tension, concern, and guilt. She defensively suggested that if I wasn't satisfied with her strong attraction to me, maybe I should address the issue myself. Noticing this change, I questioned Molly about it, expressing my observations of her anxiety and guilt, along with her defensive reaction. I urged her to acknowledge this and pleaded for honesty, asking her to tell me what was truly happening. I stressed the importance of honesty and clarity. Molly's tone softened as she apologized, explaining that she hadn't meant to react that way. She expressed the need to share what was going on, emphasizing her boundless love for me and the significance of our life together. Molly spoke sincerely during our conversation, her tone filled with confidence and tenderness. Expressing my heightened concern, I asked if she was cheating on me, fearing the worst. Molly, sounding offended but determined, denied any betrayal of trust or unfaithfulness. She reassured me of her respect for me and our relationship. Despite my concerns, Molly encouraged me to listen without making hasty judgments. She explained her intention to discuss something important and stressed the importance of having an open conversation. Molly reiterated her commitment to our relationship, expressing her desire to create a future together, have children, grow old as partners, and be with me for life. She prepared me for the challenge of comprehending what she was about to reveal, asking that I carefully listen and consider the full context. Molly clarified that she had been talking about Andrew, her colleague with whom she had gone on business trips. Alongside these trips, she had lunch, attended happy hours, and even had dinner with him last week. Molly flatly stated that she hadn't cheated or engaged in a romantic relationship. She acknowledged her actions but insisted it wasn't cheating on me. I want to stress that I truly want you to hear me out, and I apologize if my previous statement seemed contradictory, Molly said. You're right. I crossed a line by spending time with Andrew without informing you. However, I want to assure you that I don't love him. We had a flirtation that initially seemed innocent but gradually became more questionable. Everything changed when he expressed his desire for a physical relationship. Despite being 6 years younger, incredibly fit, and very handsome, she continued, I needed him to understand that my feelings toward him were passion, not love. In a fit of anger, I confronted her, asking if she was leaving me, if she loved him, or if they had already been intimate. She reassured me, saying that she wanted to emphasize once again that she hadn't been intimate with Andrew or anyone else. Molly explained. He clarified that this was part of the problem and asked me to listen. He stressed that he only loved me. Andrew is younger, and I could never develop romantic feelings for him. However, before I met you, I had limited experience. Sometimes I feel that I missed out on certain experiences that you had before we became a couple. The thought that this young man, to whom I am undoubtedly attracted, desires an intimate relationship with me troubles me. Molly continued. Andrew and I flirted at work today, which may partly explain why I came home with such a strong desire, longing for your love. She noticed my reaction as my pulse quickened and hurried to clarify. Billy, I didn't express that properly. I love you, and our intimate relationship means more to me than anything else. But it was difficult for me to shake off Andrew's infatuation, and I made the difficult decision to act accordingly and engage in an intimate relationship with him as a one-time experience before we fully commit to building our future together. I shared my need to have one last experience of connecting with another man, believing that I deserved it, Molly admitted. She asked for understanding and permission, wanting to convey her sincerity, never wanting to cheat, and respecting our relationship. She discussed it openly and sought my consent, while also making it clear that she had already made her decision about what to do next. Molly was taken aback by the anger in my eyes as I contemplated her words. In response, she bravely stated that her love was exclusively for me. She expressed her desire to spend her entire life married to me and grow old together, making it clear that what she felt for another man was not love. Struggling to come to terms with the situation, I emphasized that I understood her perspective, viewing it as a one-time opportunity to fulfill desires and gain experience. Nevertheless, I made it clear that I felt deeply hurt by her request, and the implication that my consent was a test of my love. I found it difficult to comprehend how agreeing to something beyond our commitments could repair or strengthen our relationship. As I rose from the table, a mix of resentment and anger reflected in my eyes. It was evident that Molly could sense the repercussions of her words. I hoped that, in this moment, she would contemplate whether her actions could destroy our marriage and the bonds that held us together. I needed her to grasp the significance of her request and the potential consequences it held for our relationship. I acknowledged that when she discovered my emotional connection with one of her colleagues, she felt betrayed. Conversations and walks that resembled intimacy could be seen as a form of infidelity. I recognized the pain and mistrust this had brought into our relationship. I attempted to convey that I hadn't engaged in physical intimacy with this woman, admitting to a few exchanged kisses after happy hours and acknowledging that it didn't excuse or justify my behavior. I understood the disbelief and resentment in her response and sincerely apologized for the pain I had caused her. Despite always believing in her unwavering trust and loyalty, I admitted that learning about her actions had shattered this belief. In response, I retorted bitterly, "Fine, Molly. Maybe I'll seek a meaningless romance of my own, and we'll see if you maintain that belief." With those words lingering, I abruptly stood, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. Molly called out to me, her voice pleading, "Billy, please reconsider and come back. I understand that you may think this situation could lead to personal growth and allow you to provide even more love and attention in the future, but, Molly, you're deluding yourself. Right now I can't fathom how you expect me to accept your betrayal and just endure it while claiming to love me. The truth is, I'll never truly bridge this trust gap. If you continue this affair, it means the end of our relationship. Do you comprehend the gravity of this?" With those words hanging in the air, I made my way to my car, opting to put some distance between us. Molly called for me to return, pleading, "Billy, no, please come back." Anger and pain consumed my thoughts, and I could only gaze at her in disbelief before driving off into the night. It was an overwhelming moment of shock and confusion. Seeking solace, I stayed at the Hilton Hotel in a nearby suburb for the night, trying to escape the turmoil. I spent too much time at the hotel bar, drowning my sorrows in alcohol. Eventually, I returned to my room and collapsed into bed, still reeling from the shock that Molly considered such a situation acceptable. Ignoring her calls and voicemails, I remained stunned and couldn't comprehend how she could profess her love for me while insisting on violating our marriage vows. I was well aware of Molly's stubbornness when she made up her mind, but this was not the time for it. I considered yielding and leaving everything as it was, but I feared that it would be a mistake that could destroy our marriage. I had to make her understand before the situation became irreversible. However, doubt began to creep in. Was it already too late? Even if I managed to convince her this time, how long before she would act behind my back again? This would undoubtedly shatter the remnants of trust, respect, and ultimately our marriage. On the other hand, I understood that if I allowed her to proceed, I would never see her in the same light. As I weighed the options, doubt and fear clouded my thoughts. If I consented to her request, how long would it be before she felt compelled to seek comfort in another man's arms again? Would she resent me for letting someone else fulfill her desires and not demanding her loyalty solely to me? It became clear that there was no good choice, and a sense of impending doom hung over our relationship. Something inside me suggested that our path was already leading to a tragic ending. Finally, I reached a decision. My only glimmer of hope rested on convincing her to reconsider and attend counseling with me. Together, perhaps we could uncover the root cause of her desire for intimacy outside our marriage. With this choice in mind, I marked Wednesday on the calendar as the day to broach this topic and present my arguments. Feeling the heavy burden of pain and sadness, I decided to call in sick at work. As soon as I learned that Molly was away, I returned to our house and immersed myself in completing some unfinished work on the van. Engaging in physical labor provided temporary relief from the constant emotional turmoil. I successfully installed and connected the solar panel, ensured all electrical components were in working order, and refilled the water tanks. I knew that, with one more day of work assembling the body, the van would be ready for our journey by Thursday. As Molly's return drew near, I buried myself in these tasks, seeking solace amid the heartache. After carefully researching divorce proceedings, financial matters, and seeking professional guidance, I felt I had a preliminary plan of action for both potential outcomes that awaited me. With a sense of urgency, I surveyed our home and compiled a list of my personal possessions, focusing on items of great importance to me. Time was of the essence, and I managed to visit the bank before Molly's arrival. At the bank, I acted swiftly, canceling our joint credit card and opening one solely in my name. Similarly, I closed our shared checking account and established an individual account under my name. I decided to use funds from our shared account to prepay the mortgage over the next 2 months. Afterward, I divided the remaining balance in half, issuing Molly a check for her share and placing my portion into a personal savings account. Amidst mixed emotions, I sought solace in a familiar pub I frequented. There, I sipped on beer and indulged in a hamburger, preparing myself for the impending conversation with Molly. Around 6 in the evening, Molly returned home, and upon seeing me, she immediately expressed her concern and disappointment about my sudden departure. She pleaded with me not to leave without informing her of my well-being. "I understand that you're hurting, but I was genuinely concerned about your safety. I should have ensured you knew I was okay," she said. "Molly," I replied, "I used to have absolute faith in the durability and strength of our love. However, recent events have cast doubt on the foundation of our relationship. Just a week ago, I could never have imagined that you would ask me for permission for an extramarital affair, only to continue as if nothing had occurred. I find it hard to understand how you can profess your love for me, talk about our enduring future together, and yet seek my permission for an extramarital affair. Molly, please know that I'm not questioning your love for me. But it's crucial to grasp that seeking permission doesn't erase the fact that it goes against the vows we made to each other. This remains a breach of trust in our commitments. It's essential to realize the gravity of this situation and the impact it can have on our relationship, both now and in the future. Molly, if we talk about drama and immaturity, what I'm experiencing right now far surpasses that. I look at the person I once loved, and I'm uncertain if I truly know who you are. You're asking me to accept that you love me. Yet you're also asking me to accept that you're planning an intimate encounter with another man over the weekend, and then return to our previous state as a couple and partners. Deep down, I know that things can never be the same again. Our relationship can never revert to what it was before. Consider this, Molly. How would you feel if I engaged in intimacy with someone else and then told you it's just a regular thing? It wouldn't be fair, and you're aware of that. Yes, I've had experiences with other women in the past, but that doesn't excuse or make this situation any less painful. I understand that you feel like you missed out on various opportunities in your past while I had such experiences. In response to your question, I would say that if I initiated an affair, I would expect consequences, including the possibility of being asked to leave and the uncertainty of forgiveness. So why should the circumstances be any different for you? Why shouldn't I contemplate asking you to leave? And why do you think forgiving you would be easy for me? Molly was overwhelmed by emotions, tears welling up in her eyes as she responded. I interrupted, pointing out that her statement wasn't entirely accurate. I asked if she had already committed to proceeding with the plan, if she had given her potential partner a promise. Molly attempted to defend herself, insisting that he wasn't her lover. However, she eventually admitted that she had arranged a trip with her potential partner starting the following morning and lasting until Sunday evening. Upon hearing this, I expressed deep concern and conveyed that if she went through with it, things wouldn't simply return to normal come Monday, and our relationship wouldn't be the same. Molly gasped in response. She retreated to the kitchen and took a seat at the table, pleading with me not to let this situation ruin our marriage and life together. She emphasized that I had always been and would always be her husband, the one with whom she wanted to raise our children. Feeling the profound disconnect between us, I shook my head and gently stated, "Molly, we're just not on the same page anymore. If everything you've said is true, you wouldn't even consider going through with what you're planning for Saturday. It seems this conversation won't lead to a resolution. I want to make it clear that if you proceed with your plan, our relationship will end. I'll return on Friday evening, as previously mentioned. Molly, please don't ask me to stay when you're making a choice that puts our marriage at risk. We can't just brush this aside. Let's try to find a way out of this difficult situation. I'll bring dinner around 7 on Friday night. Or by the way, what time is Andrew picking you up on Saturday morning, just so I know?" Molly replied, "I'll ask him to pick me up at 11 a.m., but please understand that you don't have to leave. In fact, I want you to meet him." Anger welled up inside me, and I retorted, suggesting that if I were to meet him, I might consider asking both of them to leave. Instead of reacting with anger, I proposed that she should consider expressing gratitude for me not completely cutting her out of my life. I urged her to think carefully about her actions before our Friday meeting, emphasizing the significant damage this situation was inflicting on our relationship, which she seemed to underestimate. I made it unequivocal that this was a promise I intended to uphold. I conveyed that if she were to end this affair and inform him that she didn't want to meet him anymore, either now or in the future, and she committed to attending counseling sessions with me to work on repairing our relationship, then there might be a chance for us to recover. But if she didn't, then I was certain our marriage would be over. "Please give me your answer on Friday evening," I said. "In the meantime, take the time to genuinely contemplate the consequences of your actions for our lives." With a heavy heart, I turned and left the house, returning to the Hilton Hotel, where I had reserved a room for the night. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, I contacted my boss and explained the extraordinary family circumstances requiring a week's absence. Despite his reluctance to delve into the details, he reluctantly granted me the day off. On Thursday morning, after Molly left for work, I returned to the house and began calmly packing my belongings. I carefully chose items that Molly wouldn't immediately notice were missing and prepared them for transport to my van. Additionally, I decided to visit the store to part with clothes I no longer wore and deemed unnecessary for my upcoming journey. I gathered all the tools, sports equipment, and recreational items that I didn't have room for and took them to my best friend Tom's house. As we sat at the table with beers in hand, I explained the situation and discussed the options I believed were available to me. Tom looked at me with disbelief and expressed strong doubts, insisting that Molly would never do such a thing to me. He emphasized how deeply in love Molly appeared to be with me. Tom questioned my confidence in the correctness of my decision, suggesting that there might be more to Molly's actions that required understanding. "Right now, I feel incredibly lost and insecure," I admitted. "Everything I thought I knew has been shattered in 1 week, and Molly seems like a completely different person. Her actions have left me bewildered, and I'm trying to make sense of it all." Can't we just forgive and forget? Can't we seek advice and find a way to move forward? I told her that we still have a chance to salvage our relationship if she puts an end to this affair. But if she goes through with it, I see no path to reconciliation. I did my best to appeal to her reason, but now on Friday evening I hoped that by showing love and care, she might be willing to heed the voice of reason. This was truly my last opportunity. It was difficult to witness the pain caused by my marriage, especially considering that we were once seen as a model of a healthy relationship. I continued with preparations for my departure, taking care of practical matters. I went to the Verizon store to get a new phone and number, ensuring that our current plan was transferred solely to Molly's name. Returning home, I refocused on the van, completing the remaining cabinet work, obtaining new license plates, and updating insurance coverage. I also turned my attention to our home computer, meticulously removing all traces of personal emails and documents to erase any remnants of my past life from the office. Additionally, I wrote a letter informing our family, friends, relatives, and colleagues about Molly's actions and my response, to provide them with an explanation in this challenging situation. If, despite all my efforts, I failed to dissuade Molly from her decision, I'd have to explain that she chose to have an extramarital affair while actively seeking my approval, despite my pleas for her to reconsider. I made it clear that I had warned her this would lead to the end of our marriage, but she proceeded. I never wanted to discuss this, but I wanted people to know the truth about what had happened. On Friday, I met with a divorce lawyer to discuss the potential outcome of our situation. Considering our comparable incomes and lack of children, I learned that the typical divorce scenario likely involved a 50-50 division of all assets. Though it was emotionally challenging, it was necessary to gather this information and prepare for the possibility of a trial. While most aspects of a potential divorce settlement seemed relatively straightforward, there was uncertainty about whether Molly would be entitled to half of my $401k retirement plan. Given that Molly had made substantial contributions for a long time, there were over $200,000 in deferred tax funds in this account. Additionally, Molly was covered by a defined benefit pension plan, creating uncertainty about its impact on the divorce process. After careful consideration, I concluded that I had worked hard to save this money. Rather than risking a 50% loss due to my wife's infidelity, I decided to accept a 40% tax penalty and withdraw the money before the divorce process began. It was a tough choice, but it provided some control and protection for the financial assets I had worked hard to accumulate. I decided to postpone any financial decisions until the weekend, because I still held hope that I could convince Molly to change her mind and end this terrible situation. Despite all my attempts to reason with her as Friday approached, I felt helpless and uncertain about our future, our marriage, and my love for her. Now, everything was in Molly's hands, and I could only pray that she made the right choice. I returned to our house and anxiously waited for Molly to come home from work. When she entered the kitchen, her face lit up with excitement, expressing how much she missed my presence at home. She sincerely thanked me for coming home, saying that she really missed me and couldn't bear it when I wasn't with her. She asked me to promise not to leave like that again. I acknowledged her feelings, stating that she was right and that we loved each other, emphasizing the importance of being together. I suggested she freshen up and take a shower while I prepared to light the grill for a lovely dinner together. I mentioned that we should cherish what our marriage meant to us. That night, Molly became visibly upset when I mentioned the uncertain future of our relationship. She replied, growing increasingly annoyed, asking me to stop questioning our marriage as it upset her. I sighed, proposing that we postpone the conversation for now and focus on enjoying the evening. I assured her that we could continue the conversation later and emphasized the need to focus on the pleasant part of the evening. I replied, "Certainly, Molly. I promise that I'll stay with you tonight, and you won't have to worry about me being upset or leaving." When Molly returned from her shower, I turned to her and couldn't help but express my admiration and sincere praise. She responded with a mischievous smile, indicating her desire to give me a glimpse of what our upcoming weeks would be like. Molly revealed that she had purchased different outfits for us to enjoy and playfully mentioned it was time to move on to the food. She expressed hunger but a preference for starting with dessert. We quickly began our meal, finishing the main course in a hurry, eager to savor the sweet finale and approach the coming weeks with excitement. Later, I gently carried Molly upstairs and placed her on the bed. After our intimate encounter, she was breathless and completely satisfied, soon falling asleep. The next morning, Molly woke up at 8:30 a.m., signaling the need to prepare for the day ahead. With Andrew scheduled to pick her up at 11 a.m., Molly's mind was filled with guilt, anxiety, and a hidden desire, despite wondering if anything could surpass the passionate lovemaking from the previous night. Molly's determination reminded her of the commitment she had made and the necessity of following through with her decision. Despite her doubts, Molly chose to proceed with the planned date, experiencing a mix of emotions and uncertainty about what lay ahead. Expressing her gratitude for the incredible night, Molly conveyed her love and appreciation, saying, "This is how I envision our future. I love you deeply and thank you for last night." When no response came, Molly focused on finishing her scrambled eggs and declined additional food. She mentioned needing to prepare for brunch with Andrew at 11 a.m. and wanted to keep her appetite for it. Planning to freshen up, take a shower, and get ready, Molly expressed her need for privacy. I nodded, allowing her to go about her morning routine without interruption. I requested a heartfelt goodbye before she left for the weekend, expressing my desire to understand the significance of our love and the events of the previous night. Molly interrupted, urging me to stop insisting it was a one-time occurrence that wouldn't alter our love. Feeling a mix of anger and sadness, I asserted that I wouldn't leave without a proper farewell. Meeting my gaze, Molly's cheeks flushed as she confirmed our enduring connection and envisioned a future filled with growth and strength. Responding with frustration, I expressed my exasperation at her capacity to believe in such words. Molly's understanding demeanor shifted as she comprehended the weight of my remarks, and tears welled up as she hurried to the back bathroom. After a quick shower and meticulous makeup application, Molly emerged with a weekend bag, aware of the limited time. Witnessing her prepared to meet another man filled me with immense anger and pain. Molly asked if I was okay, expressing concern, and I struggled for words, emphasizing my desire for a special celebration of our love. A heavy silence hung in the air as Molly absorbed my words, experiencing deep emotions. She implored me not to view this as our last night together and encouraged us to look to the future, where we could overcome this challenge and emerge stronger than ever. Molly stressed the importance of addressing deeper issues in our relationship and asked me to stop insisting that everything was falling apart. Before Molly could respond, a car approached, and she inquired if she should let Andrew in, hoping his introduction would ease my concerns. I strongly rejected the idea, threatening regrettable actions if she allowed him inside. My words lingered, revealing the depth of my suffering, leaving Molly shocked. Realizing further conversation would only escalate tension, she silently picked up her bag and headed for the door. I sat there, lost in thought, recognizing that Molly was determined to go ahead with her plans despite my efforts to prevent the affair from destroying our marriage. After 30 minutes feeling a need for change, I began moving my important belongings into the van. I noticed Molly's wedding rings left on the dresser, and with a mix of sadness and resignation, I carefully put them in my pocket. 2 hours later, I had securely packed all my significant belongings into the van, a tangible reminder of the decision we both had to confront. Overwhelmed by anger and pain, I wandered through the house in a state of confusion. The wedding album caught my attention, filled with 40 precious photos capturing memories of our wedding 5 years ago. Unable to contain my disappointment, I cut a deep cross through the plastic covering each photo and tossed them into the fireplace. The crackling flames devoured what had once symbolized our love. Sitting at the desk, my heart heavy with grief and determination, I began composing my final letter to Molly. Molly, this is my farewell message. I couldn't bear to see you walk away from me in our once cherished marriage. Your wedding rings, left behind, symbolize the abandonment of our commitments, evading the reality of your infidelity, in pursuit of a free weekend. It's difficult for me to fathom how you could believe, without a shred of doubt, that having an affair and then returning to our marriage as if nothing had changed is acceptable. I genuinely can't grasp your thought process and how breaking our sacred wedding vows could seem okay to you. Your actions have caused me immense humiliation and disrespect in our marriage. Believing that a seemingly harmless affair over the weekend wouldn't affect my feelings for you is a grave misunderstanding. In reality, it meant everything. Your actions have illuminated a significant difference between my love for you and the love you claim to feel, if it existed at all. It laid bare a vast gap between what I believed I deserved and what I mistakenly thought we shared. You've hurt me more deeply than any other experience. You took my love, ripped it out of my chest, and callously trampled on it. The initial betrayal occurred when you began flirting with your lover during dinners and happy hours. Kissing during these encounters intensified your infidelity, which you wrongly perceived as acceptable. However, the ultimate blow to our mutual love occurred when you assumed I would agree to your betrayal. How could you believe you deserved this, and that my love for you would tolerate such betrayal? I'm astounded by how your mind arrived at such an idea. Attempting to reason with you, I made it clear that our love, marriage, and friendship would never remain unaffected. Instead, you dismissed my concerns, labeling me as immature and dramatic. I implored you to halt this weekend affair before it happened, offering to consult a psychologist and make efforts to salvage our marriage. My words were ignored. Despite warning that the incredible night of love we shared would be our last if you continued, you chose to disregard me, assuming I would obediently stay by your side. I don't understand how you believed I'd agree to such betrayal. It's as if you never really knew me. I trusted you so deeply that I failed to realize you were capable of this level of destruction. While I could physically intervene, I knew it would only breed resentment and gradually dismantle our marriage. Believing this to be an isolated incident is self-deception. If this experience was unsatisfactory, how long until you seek another attraction? And if it was pleasurable, how soon until your fantasies compel you to repeat it? These questions haunt me, underscoring the crux of the issue. You might conceal future infidelities, especially considering the devastating consequences we now face. But I am certain these betrayals would persist, further eroding the fabric of our relationship. The truth is, I can't be in a relationship without trust, and your actions have utterly shattered my trust. I can't envision loving you again while tormented by thoughts of your presence beside me, or your mind wandering to other lovers during our intimate moments. It felt like all the love, respect, trust, and friendship you professed were washed away, leaving me with empty promises. I can't muster the strength to forgive you for the pain you've caused, and I can't envision ever trusting you or maintaining a friendly relationship. Just as you callously tore love from my chest, I must cut you out of my life. There are practical matters I need to address. I've divided our property and covered the mortgage payments for the next 2 months, enclosed as a check for your share of our joint accounts. I canceled our joint Verizon account as of Monday, so you'll need to start your own. Insurance policies and joint credit cards have been canceled as well, and I've legally removed my name from the mortgage loan, preparing a document relinquishing ownership of the house and transferring it to you. It's your choice whether to sell or continue living there, as it's no longer my home, and I won't return. As you can see, I sold my car and chose a van. I may eventually pawn your wedding rings for gas money. I admit that I acted impulsively in the midst of pain and anger. In a moment of frustration and despair, I used a box cutter to cut through our wedding album, leaving the remnants scattered in the fireplace. If you deem it appropriate, please burn them. It would symbolize the end of our marriage. I also confess to sending an email to our friends, relatives, colleagues, and acquaintances, informing them of your decision to continue an affair outside our marriage. I announced my decision to leave you, giving you a day or two to consider how you want to present your side of the story. I strongly recommend taking responsibility for your actions. As you move forward with your new life, you can pursue any experiences and relationships you desire. But I urge you to avoid getting involved with married individuals, as your actions have already caused enough harm to innocent lives. You're free to end our marriage, sell the house, move on, and shape your future. I leave these decisions in your hands because they no longer concern me. If I'm fortunate enough to find a woman who truly loves and respects me as I deserve, I'll be grateful for this opportunity in my life. Perhaps we can discuss divorce when the time is right. At the moment, my focus is elsewhere. I've decided to quit my job and cash out my $401k. My sole plan now is to sever all ties with you and avoid any future encounters. When I depart, I'll take a left turn on the road, leaving memories of you behind in the rearview mirror. Farewell, Molly. Finally, I began sending the letter I wrote to all our friends, relatives, and acquaintances, scheduling the mailing for Monday. By then, I should have moved away from my previous life. With one last glance, I turned away and walked out the door, hurrying away from the remnants of my past. I drove along the banks of the mighty Mississippi, pondering my next moves. I decided to follow Molly's path from Minneapolis-St. Paul to the bustling city of New Orleans. Once I reach that destination, I'll have to make a crucial decision, metaphorically speaking, to the left or to the right. During the long hours on the road, thoughts about Molly and whether I was making the right choice filled my mind. However, I concluded that now isn't the time to make immediate decisions about our future. It will be weeks before I can even contemplate the possibility of friendship, let alone staying married. In that moment, anger overshadowed any thoughts of reconciliation. But I understood that there might come a time when my anger subsides, and the desire to be with Molly outweighs the pain caused by her actions. Only then can I truly appreciate how much more important it is for me to be with her than without her. Molly had to explain her perplexing state of mind and the reasons behind her decision for a brief, intimate encounter to her parents, relatives, and friends. She expected it to be challenging for them to comprehend her train of thought or agree with her perspective. In fact, she found it difficult to grasp her own reasoning, let alone explain it to others. She convinced herself that this affair wouldn't affect her emotional state in any way. Recognizing the serious challenges ahead for both her and us as a couple, I understood that any potential path to reconciliation would require sincere efforts to overcome the difficulties. Molly had to articulate the depth of her new understanding of the devastating impact her actions had on our marriage and the love we once shared. She had to confront the harsh reality of her self-centeredness and foolishness in underestimating the importance of loyalty, not just for me, but also for her own sense of integrity. Now comprehending the consequences, Molly reached out to my best friend, Tom Wickley, desperately seeking information about my whereabouts. She implored him to convey her heartfelt apologies, expressing her love and remorse. "Molly wants me to tell you that she loves you very much, recognizes her mistakes, and is willing to do everything to make things right if you give her a chance," Tom conveyed on her behalf. "She promises not to seek a divorce and to remain faithful to your marriage vows, refraining from romantic relationships as long as you're married." Week after week, Molly anxiously waited for a response or a phone call, hoping for reconciliation. But there was no contact as she clung to the hope of my return. About a month later, an unexpected incident occurred. Andrew opened the door and encountered an assailant wearing a mask and wielding a police baton. The attacker quickly struck Andrew twice, followed by painful blows to the groin, before leaving. The attacker emphasized the importance of not getting involved with married women. After the attack, Andrew experienced excruciating pain, a reminder of the consequences of crossing boundaries. Of course, you know who the attacker was. I monitored Molly's life, wanting her to suffer as I did, perhaps, even more. Despite Molly's claim that she would wait for me and not engage in romantic relationships, she brought another man to our house 2 months after my departure. It was hardly a friendly meeting. Soon after, she sold the house and moved to a modest apartment. Dreaming of breast augmentation, she opted for plastic surgery with the money from the house sale. Unfortunately, a blood clot formed a week later, leading to her sudden passing. Upon hearing this tragic news, I didn't shed a tear. Had I lost the capacity to feel love, anger, or regret for this woman?
Story 2.
Husband caught cheating wife and AP on a plane, then handed a surprise envelope to the crew. "We need to talk." It came out of the blue one Sunday evening as we were getting ready for bed. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised. Jeanette, my wife of 4 years, had been acting strangely all weekend. I asked her a few times if she wasn't feeling well. "No, I feel fine. I just have a lot on my mind." To be honest, I did too. The Great Recession had hit both of our careers hard, and we went from having enough money to fulfill our dreams to barely scraping by. Not that any of our colleagues were faring any better. However, Jeanette was having a tough time accepting our financial setback. She grew up without much, and had grown accustomed to the luxuries we enjoyed, like our annual vacation. She never directly blamed me, but I could sense it in the remarks she made whenever we discussed our finances. I hugged Jeanette tightly and expressed my love for her, but she didn't respond in kind. Instead, she did something unusual. She poured herself a strong shot of scotch without offering me any. I instantly sensed that she had something important and troubling to tell me, and she was gathering the courage to start the conversation. After dinner, we sat in front of the TV in silence for the rest of the evening. I couldn't even remember what shows were on. All I could think about was Jeanette. When we went upstairs, instead of our usual routine of watching the news before making love, there was an unusual tension. Our bed life had suffered due to the economic downturn, just like everything else. As I finished brushing my teeth, Jeanette entered the bathroom and dropped a bombshell. Someone at work invited me on an all-expenses-paid ski trip to Colorado. A colleague had to cancel, and the tickets are non-refundable. We're leaving Wednesday morning and returning Monday. I rinsed my mouth and responded, "Someone at work? That's an interesting way to put it. Sounds like it was a man who asked you." Jeanette looked incredibly guilty. "You've answered my question. So who's the guy from work who invited you, a married woman, on vacation?" I tried to keep my composure. "You don't know him," she replied. "But I thought I knew everyone you worked with," I countered. "I do, but I don't exactly work with him," she clarified. "Now I'm confused. You said someone from work," I pointed out. "No, I said someone at work," she protested. "Okay, enough with the word games. Who's the guy who invited you?" "He's a guy I met in the office cafeteria. His office is on the 5th floor, and we've had lunch together a few times." I tried hard to keep my cool, but my voice filled the room. "How long have you been seeing him?" Jeanette started crying. Between sobs, she said, "I would never cheat on you. How can you say something so hurtful?" "Maybe because you forgot to mention that you've been having lunch with another man," I replied. "And now he's invited you, a married woman, to go skiing in Colorado with him. Plus, we haven't been intimate in almost a month. I think that sums it up." "It's not like that," she insisted. "He's a nice guy, but his girlfriend broke up with him, and he doesn't want to waste the ticket. Everything's already paid for, the hotel, lift tickets, it won't cost me anything." "Isn't that convenient?" I retorted. "Now what's his name?" "John," she said. "Does John have a last name?" I pressed. "Johnson or Jackson, something like that." You've got me so upset I can't think straight. So you're willing to fly across the country with a man whose last name you don't even know, I thundered. You're either having an affair with him or you're incredibly naive. The argument escalated and I demanded, who are these friends sharing the cabin with you? John's friends, she replied. There are 2 other couples. 2 other couples? So you're going as his date? I accused. No, he just doesn't want to waste the non-refundable ticket, she explained. Why don't you trust me, she countered. Would you trust me if I told you I met a woman in the cafeteria and she invited me on vacation? Bull crap, I snapped back. Remember how jealous you got when I was talking to that woman at the ballpark last summer? That was different, she protested. You were ignoring me. And you won't be ignoring me when you're in a cabin with John and 4 strangers, I pointed out. Jeanette screamed and stormed out of the room. It was a long, sleepless night. We both tossed and turned until about 2 in the morning when exhaustion finally overtook us. I got up at 6 and brewed a pot of coffee. Jeanette took 1 sip, threw it in the sink and said, I'm going to work. I knew then that when my wife dug in her heels, admitting she was wrong was out of the question. She was the most stubborn person I'd ever encountered. As I drove to work, I brainstormed a plan to salvage my marriage. I knew that relying on logic wouldn't cut it. This situation required a more forceful approach, as my grandmother used to say. About a year ago, I took a risk by hiring a street-smart young man who had served time in county jail for robbing a convenience store. He often reminded me that he owed me big time for giving him a chance after his release. You name it, boss, and I'll do it, he would say. So I decided to cash in on that favor. Julio, I need your help, I told him. Just tell me what you need and I'll handle it, Julio replied. After explaining my situation to him, I handed him a photo of my wife and the address of her workplace. She goes to lunch every day at noon in the basement cafeteria. I need you to discreetly snap a photo of this guy John when he's there, I instructed. Then follow him upstairs and find out where he works. At the end of the day, tail him and get his license plate number, I added. You got it, boss. And don't worry about my time card, I'll take care of it, Julio assured me. As I waited anxiously, I kept glancing at my watch, convinced that Jeanette was meeting her boyfriend to badmouth me. Despite being buried in work, time seemed to crawl by on that typical Monday. At 1:10, my phone rang. Boss, it's me. I got the photo, Julio reported. They were talking, but I couldn't hear what they said. Afterward, I followed him into the elevator. He didn't even acknowledge me. When he stepped out, I pretended to look for a room number. He went into suite 510, a place called Anderson Metallurgy Supplies, LLC. Great job, Julio, but you're only halfway there, I replied. No worries, boss. I'll stick to him like glue, Julio said confidently. After hanging up, I pulled up Google on my computer. I wasn't too hopeful, but I started typing variations of John Jackson. Unfortunately, I got plenty of name matches, but none matched the photo. I decided to check out Anderson Metallurgy Supplies, LLC and found out they were a big supplier of powdered metals for the industry. They didn't have any employee names or photos online, so I called their number and asked for John Johnson. Sorry, there's no one here by that name, they said. Oops, my mistake, I meant John Jackson, I quickly corrected myself. But they didn't have anyone by that name either. Are you sure you have the right company? They asked. My bad, wrong number. Sorry to bother you, I apologized and hung up. I stared at my computer trying to figure out how to identify that guy when my phone rang again. Boss, it's me, Julio said. After the call, I slipped into the men's room for a smoke. Guess who walked in? Johnson or Jackson. Except those aren't his real names, Julio revealed. Did he see you? I asked. Nope, I was getting ready to light up when he walked in. I overheard someone call him Mr. Jensen, Julio explained. Turns out his name is Robert Jensen. Seems like a real jerk, he added. Julio then shared that Jensen took a cigarette from him, and I praised him for his spy skills. Unfortunately, I got stuck in a logistics meeting until quitting time, so I couldn't do any more research. Julio called as I was parking in the garage. He said Jensen left the office around 3 and took the subway. I followed him to his place near Logan Square, a basement apartment at 2366 North Kimball Avenue. It was run down with burglar bars but no curtains. I hung out nearby to see if he went anywhere else. About 10 minutes later, he brought out a stack of pizza boxes and tossed them into the garbage cart. Then he came out with 2 large garbage bags. After he went back inside, I grabbed both bags. That's how my buddies steal identities. People throw away too much valuable stuff, boss. I don't know who Johnson or Jackson is, but I found a bunch of official-looking documents with the name Robert Jensen, Julio reported. Great job. Julio, let's discuss this more tomorrow, I replied. Got it, boss. What I found gave me an idea. I walked in and saw Jeanette eating a burger and fries at the kitchen table. She hadn't gotten anything for me. Ignoring that, I sat across from her and laid out my demands for a rational discussion. Jeanette tried to interrupt, but I told her to wait until I finished speaking. I'm not clueless. I remember how you phrased your vacation plans to make me think you were going with a coworker. It's time for full disclosure, I stated firmly. I need John's last name, address, email, cell number, and workplace, plus copies of the plane tickets and the mountain cabin rental address. If something happened to you, I wouldn't know where or with whom you went, I explained. Don't be so dramatic, she retorted. Let me finish, I insisted. I also need the names and numbers of the other couples. Now you may respond. He didn't rent the cabin. It belongs to his uncle, and John doesn't have a cell phone, she confessed. What do you mean? Even 5-year-olds have cell phones nowadays, I remarked. Well, he doesn't, she replied defensively. If I gather all this information, will you stop pressuring me and let me enjoy myself? She brightened up, flashing a smile. You've got one day to get me everything. Why can't you admit you're jealous because I'm going to Colorado? I slammed my fist on the table. I'm not jealous. I'm upset because in all the time we've been together, you never mentioned skiing once. Now suddenly you want to go skiing in Colorado with some guy you met in the cafeteria, and you wonder why I suspect something fishy. I swear I'm not, she protested. Just get me the info. If it checks out, we'll talk. I was tempted to tell her that her boyfriend used a fake name, but I wanted to see Jensen's reaction first. We slept as far apart as the queen-sized mattress would allow. Surprisingly, Jeanette was civil the next morning, and we even had coffee together. I arrived at the office early, anxiously pacing until Julio showed up. Jeanette was leaving soon, and this was my last chance to salvage our marriage. Julio brought a large cardboard box to work. He had sifted through the bags, separating the real garbage from the important stuff, financial records, bank statements, and legal mail. He tore open the envelopes as if that would deter identity theft. I carefully taped back together any important documents and organized them. The first item he handed me was a legal-sized envelope addressed to Robert Jensen. That guy's getting dragged to court for skipping out on child support. He's got 2 little kids, and he hasn't paid a cent in over a year. The next thing was a bench warrant for missing court over not paying child support. Julio explained, cops are too busy to come to your house, so they put your name in the system. If they catch you, even for a small thing like a traffic ticket, you're going to jail. He chuckled at that. Good plan, boss. Next, there were a bunch of overdraft notices and bounced checks from a bank in San Francisco. He got a bunch before they closed his account. Then came the best part, a printout of the flight reservations. Strange thing, boss. His ticket's round trip, but your wife's is only one way. That's not good. With this info, I can cancel their tickets. I had another idea. I'd split up the lovebirds by moving Jensen to the back of the plane and grabbing his seat for myself. After going over everything, I searched the Chicago Tribune archives and found out why Jensen used a fake name. He was a convicted offender, originally from Chicago. All 3 daily papers had printed his mugshot after he attacked someone in Denver. They didn't share many details because of a plea deal, but he ended up pleading guilty to a lesser charge and got 2 years behind bars. His wife divorced him while he was locked up. A check of the offender register confirmed where he lived. It also mentioned he got out early after just 14 months because of prison overcrowding. His first move was to find his ex-wife and beat her so badly she was in the hospital for almost a month. With 2 felony convictions, my wife still thinks he's a nice guy. I took an early lunch break and headed to the courthouse to get a copy of Jensen's divorce papers. It cost 25 cents per page for photocopies. The filing included a copy of his arrest warrant for woman offense. He drugged a young woman while skiing and offended her. I also looked into DIY divorce filings at the law library, finding a good template online and filling it out. I cited adultery as the reason and attached time-stamped photos of them chatting in the cafeteria for an hour like lovers. My last stop was the Domestic Relations Division of the Circuit Court, where I filed for divorce. I got 3 copies stamped with the official seal and a case number. I told my boss I needed a few personal days off, and he didn't ask questions. Jeanette was cooking dinner when I got home, a real meal, not something from a box. I guess she was trying to make me happy. I hugged and kissed her. She replied, "Not as good as I hoped, but better than nothing." She pulled out a folded paper from her purse. "Here, I got you everything you asked for. John Johnson doesn't have a phone, but I found his email and he's on Facebook." "Where does he work?" "He got a promotion but hasn't got his new business cards yet." When she said he couldn't even tell you where he works, I looked at her like she was crazy. I opened my laptop and went straight to Google Maps, entering the chalet address. Strike 1. Then I tried the official Denver zoning map. Strike 2. I tried every map program I could find, but they all came up empty. "Honey," I called out, "there's a problem." I checked the chalet address on 6 different mapping programs and the assessor webpage, and none of them recognize it. He must have messed up the address somehow, she suggested. What about the tickets? He said we get those at the airport. No, you get the boarding pass at the airport. You should know that from our trip to Maui. Next, I tried calling the phone numbers he gave for the other 2 couples, but neither worked. Online searches and Facebook didn't yield any results either. Honey, I hate to say it, but none of the information Johnson, if that's his real name, gave you checks out. There's no way I'm letting you go. I thought she might admit something was off with Johnson, but instead, my dinner flew across the room and hit the wall. You're not letting me? She screamed. Who are you to control where I go? I'm your husband. Why are you being so stubborn? I'm just worried about you going skiing with the guy who's lied about everything. You don't even know where you're going. Or he didn't lie. Maybe he doesn't want you causing trouble. Is he afraid I'll show up and ruin his plans? Jeanette lost her temper. She was spitting out words as she spoke. Stop saying that. We'll never be more than friends. I'm going skiing and you can't stop me. Fine, go skiing, but how are you going to afford it? We're broke, remember? I have those 2 jars full of silver coins I've been saving since I was a teenager. I was saving them for a getaway for our 5th anniversary. I'll cash them in now, and either we'll go on a vacation together or I'll use the money to hire a divorce attorney. It's up to you. Stop threatening me. I'm not threatening you. I'm making a promise, and you know I always keep my word. I don't understand why you don't trust me. Johnson hasn't exactly been a gentleman by not backing off when he found out I'm married. I told you he's only taking me because the ticket is non-refundable. I'll reimburse him for the ticket and still have enough left for us to go skiing. It's too late. We're leaving tomorrow morning and I can't reach him. Jeanette, I'm not naive. I won't be fooled by you. Any man who would let his wife do what you want to do isn't a real man. Think about how you'll explain to your family and friends why we're getting divorced. Don't give me that. I promised I'd come back relaxed and make it up to you. Please, I'm begging you. It's not too late to save our marriage. I told you I can't cancel. I promised John I'd go, and it's too late for him to find someone else. So you'll keep your promise to him at the expense of the vows we made in front of God and our families. I keep telling you, nothing's going to happen. It doesn't matter if nothing happens. You made your choice. You picked him over our marriage. I spent the night on the couch. I heard Jeanette crying in the bedroom. My mind was torn between logic and emotion. The rational side wanted to let her face the consequences and revel in it later, but my heart urged me to be the knight in shining armor and save our marriage. I spent a sleepless night wrestling with my thoughts. Eventually, I decided on a compromise. I woke up before dawn, but Jeanette ignored me. She got angry when I took a picture of her with my phone. Why did you do that? She demanded. So the police have a recent photo in case they need to identify you, I replied. She responded with a string of curses as she packed her suitcase. I entered the bedroom. If you board that plane with him, don't expect me to be here when you return. Our marriage will be over, I warned. She shot me a dirty look and retorted, I know you're not that foolish. Funny, I thought the same about you. I guess we were both wrong, I replied, before leaving without kissing her goodbye. I parked my car down the block and watched her leave. Then I returned home, shaved off my beard and mustache, dressed in a black suit with a white shirt and tie. I considered it my funeral attire, symbolizing the death of our marriage. I added sunglasses to complete my disguise, grabbed my briefcase and suitcase packed with clothes, and headed out for one last attempt. I was at the gate when Julio called at 8. He informed me of a big argument between Jeanette and Jensen outside his apartment. Despite her offer to pay for parking, he insisted they take the subway, claiming it was cheaper and they would need the money in Colorado. While she was in the bathroom, I checked her wallet. She had less than $1,100 in her possession. I hoped she wasn't planning to use our joint credit cards because I had already canceled them after purchasing my ticket. I wished I could read Jeanette's thoughts as she lugged her bags down the stairs to the dimly lit subway, known as the dark underground labyrinth by Chicagoans. The Blue Line train would be crowded with commuters heading to work. Julio thought it odd that a man flying to Denver for skiing in December didn't have a proper winter coat or even gloves. As he observed them getting pushed around by the crowd, Jeanette's dream vacation was already in jeopardy. The journey lasted a little over half an hour. Julio trailed them into the terminal and watched Jensen print out their boarding passes. Luckily, he didn't scrutinize them closely and hadn't noticed that I changed his seat assignment just before purchasing my ticket. Julio called again to inform me they had reached the TSA checkpoint, so he couldn't follow them any further. Thanks for everything. You've been a huge help, I expressed my gratitude. The screener at the X-ray machine flagged Jeanette's carry-on bag. Please step over here, ma'am, he instructed. Soon, a TSA worker was rifling through her belongings until he found the corkscrew hidden in the inside zipper pocket. I had planted it there while searching her bags earlier to see what she had packed. To my relief, there was nothing remotely suggestive. The TSA agent admonished her and confiscated the corkscrew. The timing had to be perfect for my plan to succeed. I had paid for early boarding and secured one of the first seats on the plane. I took the center seat, leaving the window seat for my wife. I decided to offer her a second chance if she chose to sit next to me so I could present my evidence. Luck was in my favor as the man with the aisle seat boarded a couple of minutes later. He was a well-built young man, likely a college athlete based on the buzz around him. Gradually, the row ahead of us filled up as stragglers searched for space to stow their carry-on bags in the overhead bins. A few minutes later, the drama unfolded. "Hey, Aho, you're in my seat," Jensen exclaimed, shoving his ticket in my seatmate's face. Jeanette, busy with her suitcase, turned to the commotion. The guy in the aisle seat pointed out, "Check the row number. You're supposed to be further back by the bathrooms." Jensen launched into a tirade, cursing the airline's incompetence and demanding to sit next to his girlfriend. Jeanette heard him refer to her but remained silent. Instead, she suggested, "John, since he doesn't want to move, maybe you should ask the man in the middle to switch seats." Without my beard and mustache, Jeanette didn't recognize me immediately, aided by the sunglasses I wore. Meanwhile, a flight attendant had made her way through the crowd, emerging from the aft galley to address the disturbance. She scowled at Jensen and ordered him to take his seat so they could complete the boarding process. "This flight is fully booked. Please take your assigned seat, and we'll see if any changes can be made after takeoff," she insisted. Jensen persisted, waving his ticket. Jeanette finally noticed me in the center seat. "What are you doing on my flight?" she exclaimed angrily. "You orchestrated this to embarrass me," she accused. "I'm not the one humiliating you. He's the one calling you his girlfriend," I retorted. Her voice dripped with venom as she moved to the empty row in front and continued berating me. "You jerk! You've ruined my vacation. I hate you. I hate being married to you," she spat out. I anticipated her anger, but her words felt like a stab to my soul. I was stunned, feeling like I had lost her. Grabbing my briefcase, I was about to leave the plane when something unexpected happened. Jensen aggressively waved his ticket in my face, and on impulse I snatched it from him. My voice trembling, I demanded, "Whose name is on this ticket?" I showed it to Jeanette. Confused, she replied, "John, who is Robert Jensen?" Jensen snatched the ticket back and crumpled it, claiming there was no name on it. The flight attendant intervened, urging us to take our seats. Jensen persisted, insisting on his seat next to his girlfriend. His disrespectful words about my wife brought me back to reality. Tears welled up as I looked at Jeanette and revealed Jensen's true identity. I handed her a copy of the bench warrant explaining that Jensen, her supposed boyfriend, had an outstanding warrant for failing to pay child support. He could afford a vacation because he neglected his own children. Opening my briefcase, I passed her the document. "You should take a look at this," I said to Jeanette, handing her the document. Her voice shook as she asked, "John, what's happening?" "Is that true?" "While you're at it, ask your boyfriend why he didn't buy you a return ticket," I added, giving her their trip itineraries, which showed her ticket was one way. Jeanette grew concerned. "John, why don't I have a return ticket?" Ignoring her, he continued arguing with the flight attendant. Did he forget to mention he spent 2 years in jail for beating his wife so badly she was hospitalized for almost a month? "I have pictures," I told her, handing over a couple of photos showing the woman's injuries. "This nice guy did this to her." Jeanette pleaded with John to confirm it was untrue, but he remained silent, focused on his argument with the flight attendant. "You need to make him move or else," I insisted, then continued. "You'd be amazed what you can find by Googling someone's real name." "Here are newspaper stories to prove it," I said, passing her several articles with his mugshot. "Does this sound familiar?" He convinced a naive young woman to go skiing in Colorado, where he and his friends drugged and offended her, I exclaimed, causing the plane to go quiet. Jeanette broke into tears. "John, please tell me this isn't true." He was too occupied arguing with the flight attendant and didn't reply. "Try Robert Jensen, that's his actual name," I suggested. Jensen might not have been the sharpest predator, but it seemed to finally register with him. "I'm going to kill you," he yelled and lunged at me, but his punch landed on the flight attendant's face instead when I dodged. Chaos erupted in the narrow aisle. My seatmate, a starting defensive tackle at a Big Ten college, swiftly restrained him until the police handcuffed him. He was hailed as a hero, and the airline upgraded him to first class as a reward. Jensen learned offending a flight crew member is a felony. Despite his excuse that he intended to hit me, not the flight attendant, the police weren't sympathetic. I handed Jeanette all the evidence I had gathered. "I swear every word is true," I assured her. Jeanette stared at the documents without a word. "It's over." "Let's go home," I said, hoping for an embrace. But she remained silent, staring at the floor. Then it worsened. As the police escorted Jensen off the plane, he kept shouting, "I had your wife." My eyes begged Jeanette to deny it, but she turned away silently. An airline security guard informed us that we were being handed over to the Chicago Police Department for our involvement in the incident. Before we boarded, I overheard a flight attendant announcing, "Let the gate agent know." 3 seats just became available. I silently thanked the heavens. As we walked through the cabin, I felt the stares of the other passengers, their cell phones snapping pictures like crazy. Now Jeanette got a taste of real humiliation. Not a word escaped her lips during that walk. It seemed like she was caught off guard. I too was in a daze. My knees felt weak, but I forced myself to keep moving, holding my head high. I wanted everyone to know I did everything I could. The plan worked almost perfectly, except I saved Jeanette but lost my wife. The police separated us for questioning. Even Homeland Security was involved. I spent an hour recounting everything about Jensen, then they left me alone with a cup of stale coffee for 2 hours while they contacted their colleagues in Denver. I paced like a caged animal, debating the fate of my marriage. Did my wife betray me with Jensen, or was he lying to tear us apart? And if she didn't do it, why didn't she defend herself? The questions spun in my head endlessly. When the detective returned, he revealed they found evidence in Colorado. My wife was sickened when she saw the pictures of the rundown shack where Jensen planned to take her, with his 4 friends awaiting their arrival. They had set up the shack with restraints and chains so no one could escape. We found enough sedatives hidden in his bag to knock out an elephant for a week. It didn't take much convincing to get them to spill their plan for their next victim. My wife wouldn't have stood a chance. They planned to finish her off when they were done with her, the detective said. My wife went pale as they confessed their intentions, then she passed out cold. When he finished, the detective suggested I talk to my wife alone. It wasn't really a suggestion, it was more like an order. "Yes, sir," I replied. I unlocked my briefcase and pulled out the divorce papers. "What's that?" the detective asked. I explained that I'd told Jeanette I'd divorce her if she got on the plane with Jensen. "Have you no compassion?" he asked. "She's broken. You're being reckless. She's in shock from realizing how close she came to being killed," he continued. "You said you did all of this to save your marriage. Hand her that, and you'll destroy her." I remained unmoved. The part of me that loved her had disappeared. "She knows she messed up big time. Right now, you're the good guy. You pulled off an incredible plan to rescue your wife. You're like a hero, you can't abandon her." "I plan to give these to her at their love nest," I admitted. "But considering the circumstances, even after all she's done, if Jeanette apologizes, I'll tear these up today. But I still intend to divorce her. I give you my word, but you can't let her know." "You have my promise," the detective said. A minute later, he brought my wife into the room. I caught a quick glimpse of her before she covered her face with her hands. She looked terrible and smelled of vomit. She sank into the chair and started crying. The detective stood over her and said, "Mrs. Manel, I've been a cop for over 29 years, and what you did was the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. If anyone ever deserved to be killed, it's you. You should thank God every second for your husband and every heartbeat he gave you. You owe him for the rest of your life." He shut the door behind him as he left. The room fell silent except for my wife's sobs. Not a single word, no thanks, no apology, nothing. After about 5 minutes, I grew tired of waiting for her to speak. "You sacrificed our marriage for a ski trip that cost less than $1,500. $1,500, that's all our hopes were worth. How can I ever trust you not to leave me for the next shiny thing after this?" Inside, I begged her to say something, but she remained silent. Tears streamed down my face as I waited for her to respond. When I couldn't bear it any longer, I said, "If you had said sorry at any point, I would have torn up this paper. I can't wait any longer." I gave her a copy of the divorce papers. Jeanette screamed so loudly that the detective rushed back in to check on her. "I've already packed my stuff. Whatever I left behind, you can donate or toss," I told her, handing over the keys to her apartment, and walked away without looking back. The next time I saw her was in court. The judge ordered us to undergo counseling. I reluctantly went along with it, but I never planned on reconciling with her. During the sessions, the counselor saw how full of regret my ex-wife was. As I expected, the counseling didn't work out, and after 7 months, I was officially divorced. I never heard from Jeanette again, not that I wanted to. Jensen was charged with conspiracy to harm someone and is still serving his sentence. I hope they keep him locked up forever.
Story 3.
Darn it, I got too greedy. That final $2 million probably tipped them off. I should have just let it go. I sensed something fishy with that bill. Darn it. Now they're closing in, though they seem to think I'm unaware. This'll help. I still have time to vanish and ensure they can't track me any further. Good thing I had a plan for this. But who am I? And who's after me? My current identity doesn't matter. It's vanishing soon. In 2 hours, I'll transform completely. The trail the pursuers are following will lead to a dead end before they gather enough info to unmask me. What I am, or soon will be, is a hacker. A damn good one. And a furious one, with a short list of targets. I'm going after odd cartels, monitoring their finances and discreetly tipping off the authorities with incriminating evidence. Personally, I've nailed 4 politicians, at least 50 cops, a dozen soldiers across borders, and countless other turncoats. Plus, I've drained over $100 million from their accounts, keeping a cut for myself, but funneling about 80% to various charities, mostly aiding dependents and supporting rehab programs. Why, you wonder? It all started with my little sister getting mixed up with the wrong guy. I really didn't approve of him, but she wouldn't heed my warnings. I tried everything, but she made her choice. I did my best to look out for her after our folks passed away. I've always had a knack for computers. However, the 2 bleak years I spent in solitary despair after identifying what remained of her body elevated me from skilled to almost supernatural. Holed up in the basement of our parents' old place, I delved into dark secrets and mastered their manipulation. I uncovered backdoors in most security systems. At some point during those years, damning intel about a gang of fiends who tortured and homicided my sister landed in the DEA's lap. Rival gangs got wind that this gang had state evidence and were using it to negotiate deals, prompting them to act faster than the authorities. So the government saved a bundle on legal battles. Now, those on my tail are on the cartel's payroll, the same cartel I relieved of about $30 million. I really should have stopped at $28 million, but I stumbled upon another small account. I sensed something fishy about it, but I was young, foolish, and still seething. Once that money passed through 40 accounts in 6 countries, my anti-hacking system started sounding alarms. They planted a trace program on the account they targeted, where the breach originated. It'll take them some time. They had to sift through around 100 IP addresses before even reaching a chain of bypass servers. I plugged in the flash drive and executed a few commands. The trail leading to me was effectively severed, leaving them no access to data. The vacant building I called home went up in flames due to a homeless fire that spiraled out of control. The hard drives, memory cards, and all my personal documents went up in smoke in a desert fire. Convinced there was no salvaging any info from the ashes, I hopped in my van and headed west, arriving in Las Vegas 4 days later. "Sweetheart, I need your help. The computer's acting wonky again," I pleaded with my lovely wife, Linda. "Honestly, Mark, how can a 25-year-old guy be so clueless with computers?" she quipped, planting a quick kiss on my forehead. A few clicks and keystrokes later, I was back to checking emails. "Dinner's in half an hour." "Thanks, dear," I replied, watching her retreat to the kitchen. It's been 2 years since Linda and I tied the knot, and I still can't believe my luck. After leaving my old life behind, I reinvented myself, working as a trucker at a local lumber mill. With decent wages, thanks to our trade union affiliation, I carefully withdrew a couple $100,000 from one of my offshore accounts and bought a cozy 3-bedroom house on an acre of land. I built a discreet structure next to the house for storage and set up a hidden room to revamp my computer system. It looked like a regular concrete floor, but underneath, it housed stairs leading underground. I made the decision to lay off chasing down our dealers and cartels for a bit. I had enough cash tucked away in case of emergencies, and it seemed wise to vanish for a while and let things simmer down. However, I didn't want to lose my expertise, and I needed to stay current with new tech. The shop was for my hobby of restoring classic muscle cars. Since my wife had zero interest in that, she never stepped foot in my store. It also provided me with the solitude to go online and dabble a bit without her catching on. You might wonder why I keep this side of me hidden from her. Well, she knows me as a simple mechanic and truck driver with little computer knowledge. Obviously, when we first met and started dating, I couldn't just come clean about being a hacker known as Ghost in the cyber underground. Firstly, the feds were after me for several cyber crimes, eager to recruit me for their own purposes. Secondly, there were some dangerous criminal outfits running down for me. If they caught wind of me, things would have turned ugly fast. How would our relationship fare after that? Need you even ask? After we tied the knot, I had a few more precautions to take. It was for her safety. If she remained oblivious, they couldn't exploit her for information. No, it's better that she only knows the man she married. Let me tell you a bit about my wife. First and foremost, she's the most gorgeous woman in the world to me. I often hear in stories how each woman is deemed the most beautiful, and I wonder how that can be. I won't sugarcoat it. To you, she might just seem average in appearance, but to me, she's a goddess. It's all about differing perspectives and tastes. She stands at 5'6", with wavy, coppery bronze hair flowing down to her mid-back. Her emerald green eyes are captivating, and she's a size 34D, with a small waist, flat tummy, slightly wider hips, and an incredibly attractive posterior measuring 40 inches. Her legs are long, slender, toned, and sun-kissed. She boasts a slender nose, high cheekbones, dimples when she smiles, full kissable lips, and a modest chin that's not overly prominent. So, how did we meet? I was on duty at the sawmill one afternoon when she walked in. She needed a couple of boards for shelving in her new apartment. As we selected her order, she mentioned her lack of proficiency with tools. Seizing the opportunity, I offered to swing by after work to set up the shelves. My only request? She'd buy the beer, and I'd accept dinner as payment the next evening. From there, dinner transitioned into dancing. Sorry to disappoint, but there's no scandalous lovemaking tale here. Our date concluded with a simple, chaste kiss on the cheek. Truth be told, I was rather apprehensive around women. Allow me to explain. When I pilfered all that money from the cartel, I was a scrawny 19-year-old, weighing in at 110 pounds, a complete computer nerd. My romantic encounters up to that point were non-existent. Since relocating to Las Vegas, I've only had 3 encounters with courtesans. The first was underwhelming. She seemed robotic. The second, at a brothel in Pahrump, at least pretended to care. The third, also in Pahrump, was more instructional. I paid for the entire night and had her truly teach me how to satisfy a woman. Now, I was in a relationship with a woman I genuinely admired. It wasn't until our 5th date that we finally had lovemaking. I treated her to dinner at the Stratosphere before hitting up a lively dance club on the Strip. After indulging in an expensive bottle of wine and a few drinks while dancing for a solid 2 hours, we headed back to my place. I used to think she was beautiful, but seeing her without clothes on, she was an absolute goddess. I didn't even need to ask. Her damp sheets confirmed everything was all right. As long as I made her happy, I was content. Apparently, the last courtesan I visited had taught me well. Additionally, I spent a whole year engaging in sports, which, combined with my work, increased my muscle mass and endurance. I now stood at 6 feet 1 inch tall. Despite considering myself a nerd, one thing I had never really considered was the size of my manhood. I just assumed I was average like everyone else. Of course, the courtesans raved about my size, but they had to, right? I didn't truly believe them when they praised my size. Linda and I dated for about 6 months before I popped the question, and 6 months later we tied the knot. We were happy together. Linda worked as an accountant for a large national company with an office in Las Vegas, pulling in a decent salary that, combined with mine, allowed us to live quite comfortably. I never needed to dip into my secret accounts. We dined at top-notch restaurants, caught shows, enjoyed rides on a nice pontoon boat on the lake, and both drove nice cars. Our bed life was pretty good, averaging about 4 times a week. Since we didn't have children yet, we made love all over the house, in the backyard, in the pool, in the hot tub. We relished the variety. Typically, after returning from work, I'd spend a couple of hours tinkering in my store before dinner. Half the time, I'd be working on one of my machines, while the other half, I'd be in the room playing on the computer. I wasn't doing anything explicitly wrong. I just hacked into places I shouldn't have been. I never actually stole anything or tampered with systems. I simply honed my skills. Sure, I could have pilfered loads of data and money, but I didn't want to leave any traces. After dinner, we'd cuddle up on the couch and watch a movie before turning in for the night. Sometimes our bedtime routine included a couple of hours of lovemaking before drifting off. I continued to exhibit my complete technological ineptitude. After all, who would suspect that someone who struggles to check their email is one of the world's most wanted hackers? Throughout all this time, I was hacking into the computer systems of banks, governments, and major corporations. I also reconfigured the legion of personal computer bots I once possessed. I concealed my whereabouts by launching my hacks from foreign servers, sometimes multiple servers simultaneously. About 6 months ago, I noticed Linda becoming a bit more tense. It didn't seem like a major issue at the time, though. Our frequency of lovemaking dropped from about 4 times a week to 2. She began working longer hours and seemed exhausted when she came home. Most nights, she'd head straight to the shower, eat dinner, then hit the hay. When I inquired, she mentioned something about a hefty bill they were trying to settle. It sounded plausible enough. Occasionally, she'd ring me up from her office on a Friday, letting me know she'd be hitting happy hour with some coworkers post-work. She'd done this enough times for me not to fret. After about 6 months, I inquired about the duration of these outings, figuring they'd either settle the bill or misplace it by then. Linda mentioned it'd likely be another week or two before things settled down again. Feeling she deserved some TLC after her hard work, I surprised her with a full-day spa package for that Saturday. She was over the moon when I presented it to her on Wednesday night. After expressing her gratitude, we found ourselves in bed, enjoying each other immensely. Saturday rolled around and she departed for her spa day at 9 a.m. With a quick kiss goodbye, she headed out, not returning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I grabbed my coffee and headed to the shop to wrap up the engine I had on the bench. After about an hour's work, I took a break and made my way to the computer room. Up to that point, I intentionally refrained from hacking into Linda's company's systems. It was a principle I staunchly upheld, kind of like not fouling your own nest. I was resolute about this. I never meddled with the company I worked for, nor would I with the one she worked for. After logging in and checking my security programs, I started to ponder the nature of this significant account. Perhaps it was worth investigating further, maybe even accessing their servers to see what they held. Their security was laughably easy to bypass. I was in within minutes. My first destination, Linda's computer. Since she was working on the project, I figured I could glean some insights from there. Odd. There was nothing particularly noteworthy about the new major clients. I ran a few searches using keywords like offer, new client quote, and related terms, but found nothing. I then delved into her folders. That's when I stumbled upon a locked folder labeled Photos for James. Why did Linda have a folder of photos for that little weasel? Yes, I knew who James was. I'd met him several times at corporate events I attended with Linda. Despite her belief that he was quite adept with computers, I didn't particularly care for him. It took mere seconds to unlock the folder. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. Inside were dozens of photographs without clothes of Linda in her office, some depicting her engaged in carnal acts with another man in various positions. What struck me the hardest was the inclusion of photos of carnal activities she had consistently denied me. I sat there, staring blankly at the images. In that moment, a part of me felt like it died. Eventually, I snapped out of it and began to contemplate confronting her as soon as she returned home. Divorcing this deceitful woman was inevitable. I still had a few hours before her return, so I pressed on with my search for more clues. I suspected this all began about 6 months ago, when I first noticed a change in her behavior. Upon delving into her email, I was met with an even greater shock. Several email exchanges revealed that her affair with this other person was far more long-term than I had initially thought. Apparently, they had been involved for about a year before she even met me. If that's the case, why did she start a relationship with me in the first place? What's really going on here? Another email mentioned accounting discrepancies with some major clients, as well as their own company, along with something about an offshore account. I switched over to James's computer. There, too, were photographs of Linda, some depicting her in what seemed to be a motel room and in another man's bedroom. Realizing I needed more time for this, I decided to make copies of both his and Linda's computers, as well as their folders on the company network, onto a spare drive on my server. Out of habit, I checked the personnel folder on the server and paused when I noticed my name on one of the folders. Before disconnecting from the network, I discreetly installed spyware on both computers and the server, ensuring that all their activities would be redirected to my system. Needless to say, work on my cars took a back seat for a while. When Linda returned from her spa day, she expressed her gratitude with a night of passionate lovemaking. Yes, I was disgusted by her actions, but I'm only human. I couldn't pass up the opportunity for incredible closeness with such a beautiful, enthusiastic, and energetic woman. She could be the devil incarnate, and I'd still seize the chance. In my eyes, she was exactly that. Come Sunday, I returned to my shop. Linda was still asleep, so I took the opportunity to access her phone and install spyware on it. This way, text messages would be discreetly copied to my computer system, and all phone calls would be monitored and digitally recorded on a separate hard drive. I'd also be able to track her online activities. Linda left around 10 a.m., mentioning she was meeting a friend for a shopping trip. Since she had disabled the Find My Friends app on her phone, I resorted to hacking into her car's internal GPS to track her movements. Surprisingly, she indeed went to the mall. Once I confirmed she wouldn't be back soon, I seized the opportunity to take her laptop. My first task was to duplicate all its contents onto another hard drive. Subsequently, I installed a keylogger program and configured the camera for remote access. Aware that I didn't have much time before returning the laptop to its original place, I quickly skimmed through her browser history. It was then that I stumbled upon a second email address. I also noticed multiple visits to a bank in the Cayman Islands. That would require further investigation later. I wiped off some grease and oil from my hands and face to create the illusion of having worked on the car when I heard Linda return home. Then it was the usual routine: shower, dinner, a movie, and off to bed. For a week, I meticulously upheld the facade of an oblivious, caring husband. Each evening, I'd head to the shop, ostensibly to tinker with one of my cars for a couple of hours. In reality, I was sifting through heaps of data I had gathered. Then, on a Tuesday evening, I stumbled upon an exchange between Linda and James that piqued my interest. James cautioned her about deleting the browsing history on my laptop after using it. Why did she need my laptop? Sure, I had configured my laptop to connect to servers right after purchasing it, but the notion of spying on myself had never crossed my mind. The following evening, while reviewing the day's updates from their work computers, I noticed another data stream incoming. Instantly recognizing it as from my personal laptop, I prioritized it over everything else. As I delved into this new stream, it became evident that money transfers were occurring. I activated the laptop camera and redirected the feed to another screen. Linda was working on my computer, Bluetooth earpiece in place. The microphone captured her voice during a phone call. Using a third screen, I initiated a live feed of her conversation. I watched and listened as Linda, under James's guidance, transferred around $50,000 from a fabricated account at their company to a bank in the Cayman Islands. And all this was orchestrated through my computer. After completing the task, she wiped the day's history and logged out. What's really happening here? I hadn't yet had a chance to inspect my personnel file from their HR folder. To compound matters, I discovered I had been appointed as a computer security consultant, unbeknownst to me, of course. James, as the head of their IT department, apparently made the hiring decisions. Furthermore, I found several payments for my services, all funneled into the Cayman Islands account. It was clear. I was unwittingly roped into a scheme where Linda and James utilized my computer and IP address to transfer large sums of money from a fictitious account at their company to an offshore bank. Additionally, I learned of Linda and James's affair. Even before meeting Linda, I could sense I was being drawn into something sinister. It was time for a change of strategy. Now fully aware of the situation, I needed to assess the extent of the problem and devise a plan of action. It was dire. Upon scrutinizing the Cayman Islands account, I discovered nearly $10 million stashed away. Reviewing the transactions, I noticed they commenced about 6 months after Linda and I tied the knot. They had also attempted to obfuscate the computer used to execute the money theft. Adding to the complexity, a deeper dive into my personal file unearthed several alarming red flags. When the situation inevitably hit the fan, I was squarely in the crosshairs. So, what's my move now? Surprisingly, it wasn't too difficult to play it cool around this woman. Did she want to be engaged in physical relationship? I indulged her. As things progressed, I found myself enjoying both of them. What can I say? She's attractive. Yes, I seized every opportunity for closeness with her. The following Saturday, I delved into her emails from the beginning of our acquaintance. That's when I discovered they had singled me out as their scapegoat from the start. While she found me appealing and believed being engaged in physical relationship with me wouldn't be a hassle, she harbored concerns about my evident lack of computer skills. James, on the other hand, saw it as an advantage. The less I knew about computers, the less likely I was to uncover their scheme. Now it was time for a retaliatory plan. I began orchestrating everything. First, I opened a couple of new bank accounts. Then, I activated the bot army I had assembled. Most of these bots would serve as a distraction, but I had a small group that could be traced back. It would pose a challenge, requiring a skilled hacker to trace it to its source. I didn't want it to be too straightforward. Naturally, I deleted the personnel folder containing my name from Linda's company servers. Additionally, I hacked and altered all file transfers conducted on my laptop to display a different IP address. To prevent a recurrence, I unleashed a potent virus on my laptop and disconnected it from my clandestine servers. Later that evening, when I checked my email, I discovered that a virus had ravaged my laptop from the spam I had opened, virtually rendering it useless. I wasn't surprised to see concern etched on Linda's face when she saw the damage. The next morning, I stumbled upon a conversation between Linda and James. Apparently, they were nearing the end of their scheme. They just needed 2 more transfers to secure another $10 million before springing the trap on me. The plan was to suddenly uncover the theft. Naturally, since Linda would be the one to make the discovery, she would spearhead the investigation. Meanwhile, James, as the IT manager, would oversee the cyber aspect. No wonder all evidence pointed directly at me. Linda, of course, would file for divorce while I languished in jail. Then, in about a year, she'd marry James. Sure, there might be some suspicion regarding Linda's possible involvement, but she would deflect by citing her investigation and her belief that I had been concealing my computer knowledge from her. Moreover, it would appear evident that she was a sufferer, as I had specifically targeted her and exploited her to gain access to the company's computer systems. They chuckled at the idea of me fielding questions about the missing money when I was clueless about what the police were talking about. Linda offered to purchase me a replacement laptop, suggesting they could finalize the last transfers within the next 3 weeks. Now, I had a clear deadline. Come Monday, I informed my boss that I needed a week off for personal matters, which wasn't an issue given my surplus of free time. I scoured the internet to locate the toughest, most ruthless divorce attorney in town and scheduled an appointment for the following day. While they believed they had a 3-week window, they'd be fortunate to make it to 2. Upon returning home, I powered up the computer and got down to business. I accessed James's home computer for an IT expert. You'd think he'd be savvy enough to power it down when not in use, but no such luck. He merely turned off the monitor. I routed his computer through a server in Belarus, though ultimately the connection would be obliterated. His computer would be a dead end for anyone attempting to trace it. The cartel I infiltrated 5 years ago had at least taught me a thing or two about security. Despite changing their accounts and passwords, they still utilize the same banks. Updated passwords are only effective if you don't store them on personal computers, which are vulnerable to phishing attacks embedded in email links promising products any multimillionaire would desire. This was just the preliminary phase. I'd deal with James after I finished with Linda. James wouldn't survive this, and I still needed him to bring Linda down. As per my routine, I headed to my shop to tinker with my car. Meanwhile, she dashed off to Walmart to procure a new laptop for me. During her absence, I laid the groundwork for the scheme. It was crucial for her to be present at home when using the computer. If she could prove she wasn't home, she'd have an alibi. I couldn't allow that. Upon her return, she messaged me that she'd purchased the laptop and estimated it would take about an hour to set it up for me. I expressed my gratitude and got to work. Initially, he severed all connections with James. Despite my disdain for her, I still didn't want her to suffer. James would likely face torture and end of life, while Linda might only end up in prison for decades, who knows. I established a separate server route to Linda's laptop, providing a direct link to her work computer and then to the company servers. $20 million was funneled from the company into 4 accounts under her name. Travel arrangements were finalized, securing a one-way ticket for her to the Cayman Islands on Thursday morning. Before she left her computer, I purged James from her contacts, deleted all emails with him, and wiped the account's history clean. Subsequently, I removed all my spyware, taking a calculated risk that she wouldn't have enough time to react. Too bad. Next, I terminated and erased the connection with her laptop. After completing these tasks, I remotely disabled the wireless router in the house. I possessed a separate superior router in the store, unbeknownst to her. A message surfaced from the spyware I planted on her phone. Apparently, she had finished setting up the laptop for me when the internet suddenly vanished, just as she was about to execute another transfer on my computer. I couldn't help but laugh as they grappled with the issue. While they were preoccupied, I swiftly transferred all the stolen money into new accounts under Linda's name. Once the account was depleted, I promptly closed it. Lastly, I removed the spyware from Linda's phone to prevent any unwanted attention. Satisfied with my actions, I headed out for dinner. Tomorrow promised to be an eventful day, to say the least. Linda appeared visibly anxious, to put it mildly. Upon my arrival, she informed me that my new computer was set up and ready, but the internet was down, preventing me from logging in or checking my email. Little did she know, this posed minimal inconvenience for me. Throughout the evening, she remained preoccupied, engrossed in her phone during the entire movie. I sensed her growing disappointment, suspecting her attempts to access the account had failed. She also seemed to be messaging someone. As I retired to bed, a smile crept onto my face. There would be no closeness that night. The following morning, I left the house before Linda departed for work. biding my time until my appointment with the lawyer. I couldn't help but wonder how Linda's day would unfold. Soon enough, I would have all the answers. Finally, I was ushered into my lawyer's office. You know those TV dramas where a dashing lawyer, impeccably dressed in a suit that's both professional and seductive, strides into the courtroom and effortlessly outmaneuvers the opposition? That was my lawyer. Standing at 5'6", with an angelic face, curves that could make a race car swerve, legs that seemed to stretch for miles, and a chest that could incite a war. Within 2 minutes of the hearing, it was clear she was going to be a formidable force in the courtroom. You could practically hear your heart harmonizing with the choir in the room. After ensuring confidentiality, I confided in her about my wife's infidelity throughout our entire relationship. Then, I detailed the embezzlement and the setup. When she asked how I knew all this, I gave a partial explanation. Well, let's be honest, I spun quite a tale. I claimed I was using my wife's laptop because mine was malfunctioning. And that's when I stumbled upon a folder filled with explicit photos and discovered her incriminating emails to her lover. Those emails laid bare her betrayal and their illicit dealings. I just wanted out of this marriage before the proverbial hit the fan. She agreed to handle the case and begin preparing the necessary documents. She mentioned she could serve her by week's end. However, I urged her to hold off for a moment. I had a sudden stroke of inspiration and didn't want to tip my hand too soon. With that, we wrapped up the meeting and I returned home, fired up my system, reactivated my home Wi-Fi, and got down to business. I left spyware operational on Linda's work computer. Apparently, things went haywire pretty quickly. Bright and early the next morning, an emergency meeting convened. The $20 million theft was uncovered, sparking an immediate investigation. Meanwhile, I managed to hack into James's phone. James traced the theft back to Linda and discovered their account had been drained, and the funds transferred to new ones totaling $20 million. Accusations flew, but no plausible explanations emerged. Suddenly, Linda received an email summoning her to a meeting with the CEO, CFO, and head of security. This was bound to be interesting. The sound of several cars pulling into my driveway interrupted my leisure. I secured the premises, heading to the main store and ensuring the secret door was locked. No need for anyone to poke around in there. To keep up appearances, I slicked some lube on myself to mimic working on my car. Exiting the store, I spotted police cars and large Chevrolet Suburbans. The officers wore standard uniforms, but those emerging from the SUVs sported windbreakers with FBI emblazoned on them. Curious. I barely glanced at the warrants before ushering them into the house, offering full cooperation since I had nothing to hide. Playing guide, I pointed out my wife's computer and mentioned mine, which had barely been touched since we got it yesterday, with the Wi-Fi down last night. "Take what you need," I said. "I'm not really savvy with computers." My story held up during several hours of harsh questioning at the police station. After all, I was just a truck driver with minimal computer knowledge. I professed ignorance about my wife's work as an accountant, insisting I didn't know her clients. A one-way ticket out of the country, only she would know about that. Poor James, forced to testify against her, must have felt deeply betrayed upon discovering she had siphoned off the money into her own accounts, leaving him with nothing. They soon realized I was clueless about the situation. Despite a thorough search of my store, they failed to uncover the entrance to the computer room. Eventually, they sent me home. Linda was arrested while I was being interrogated. James, witnessing the discovery of the money, must have been gutted to learn she had cut off his access, transferred the funds, and skipped town, leaving him high and dry. Thankfully, I anticipated the impending interrogation since, after all, I'm her husband. It's logical to assume I'd be implicated in this. Naturally, she reached out to me as her only call, so I promptly secured a lawyer for her. I extensively researched local defense attorneys to ensure I didn't inadvertently hire a competent one. Instead, I deliberately chose a subpar lawyer, aiming for her conviction and full sentence. What's intriguing is the federal nature of this case. There's no parole or early release. If sentenced to 20 years, it's 20 years served. I attended her bail hearing, using our house as collateral to secure her release. Due to flight risk, she wore an ankle monitor. Despite my disdain, I maintained the facade of a caring husband. Fortunately, her distress spared me any marital duties. Her phone, seized as evidence, was swiftly replaced by me, complete with my spyware. Oddly, James blocked her. When she reached out, he declined contact, aware he'd testify against her. Stubbornly, she rejected a plea deal, adamant someone framed her. She truly believed she'd triumph. Admittedly, she did take half the money, but not all. Nor did she use that account, her own computer, buy a ticket, or fire her partner. The money was returned without issue. The trial amused me. Watching James testify against his lover using computer records revealed his inner conflict. He believed she planned to flee, leaving him behind. Linda felt betrayed by her supposed soulmate, leading to her imprisonment. I felt triumphant during the 3 days of his testimony, witnessing her transition from love to resentment. Despite her efforts on the stand, the overwhelming evidence left her unable to provide a credible defense. She now faces a 20-year sentence in federal prison. With the trial concluded, it was time to deal with James. I had a devious plan for him, though he'd never know it was me behind his downfall. Such a scheme would be satisfying. I instructed my lawyer to update the divorce papers to reflect Linda's conviction and lengthy incarceration. Within days, she was served. Setting up new accounts in Geneva and the Cayman Islands tied to James, I subtly left traces on the dark web, all pointing to his IP address. The ghost of my past exploits resurfaced after 5 years, sparking chatter among hackers. Now, the challenge was to leave a trace convincing enough to implicate an experienced hacker, yet subtle enough to cast doubt on my involvement. I navigated through 10 servers spread across 6 different countries. Eventually, I deployed a legion of bots and initiated an assault on the initial bank. After gaining access, I located the 2 target accounts and moved them to James's newly created accounts. With that task completed, I halted the bank attack, severed my connection to James's computer, and monitored the dark web for any responses. While I didn't anticipate immediate repercussions, caution was paramount. The following morning, another bank fell sufferer to an attack, resulting in the depletion of 4 additional accounts. Now, $20 million resided in the account I had established for James, prompting a search for me. Though they would not uncover me, the digital trail would eventually lead to the Phantom. Various dark web hacker forums ignited with activity, indicating a group tracking the trail, likely the same one from 5 years prior. It was time to conclude this. Returning to the bank, I bypassed James's computer and transferred $20 million to another account in Switzerland, ensuring no trace of the transaction remained. I had no concerns about the cartel reclaiming that money. After reaccessing James's computer, I launched a targeted attack on a bank account containing a tracker. This time, the sum was inconsequential. Only $2 million mattered, solely for the tracker it carried. Last time I fled because I was aware of the thefts and understood how the beacon operated. If I hadn't been informed about the money transfers or the accounts I possessed, and if I hadn't been aware of the tracker linked to that final account, I would have been apprehended. I'm curious to see how James will attempt to justify all this to them. It'd be interesting to watch them grill him about the money when he's clueless about what money they're referring to. Now it's time to sever connections with his computer and eliminate all traces of my involvement. This occurred a week later. I cleared out my computer room and repurposed it as a storage area. While I was wrapping up paperwork for a property I had bought in Montana through an anonymous C corporation, a news report aired about a missing person. James hadn't reported to work for a couple of days, and his whereabouts were unknown. His vehicle was discovered abandoned in a shopping center parking lot, yet he remained elusive. I pondered where he could have gone, but I had to return to packing. "No!" I shouted as they used the cattle prod on me once more, trying to extract information. "I swear I don't know what you're talking about." "Crap, Mr. Ghost," they retorted. "This time you slipped up. The tracking software led us directly to your computer. We found all the data on it. We recovered $2 million from the recent hack, but we want to know where the remaining $20 million is, along with the $30 million from 5 years ago. Give us this information, and we'll end your suffering swiftly. Keep lying, and it'll only get worse." However, I'm clueless. They seized me as I was about to enter my car at the mall. I felt a sharp prick in my neck from a needle. Then, darkness enveloped me. Several hours later, I regained consciousness aboard a private jet, securely fastened to my seat. That's when the interrogation commenced. I had no clue what they were referring to. They repeatedly referred to me as Ghost and inquired about the money they claimed I had stolen a few days prior. Allegedly, $20 million had vanished, along with another $30 million 5 years ago. My protestations of ignorance fell on deaf ears. When confronted with incontrovertible evidence on my personal computer, I was utterly shocked. I could provide them with the information they sought, and meet a swift demise. Alternatively, they would extend my remaining, albeit brief, lifespan into unrelenting torment. I sealed my fate when I realized I had no responses to offer them at present. Suspended undressed from the ceiling of a bunker buried deep within the jungles of Colombia, I endured unspeakable torment. My legs were forcibly spread apart, granting them access to my genitals with the aid of cattle prods. It's been 3 agonizing days. On the initial day, I endured beatings for my silence. The following day brought the lash of a whip. Today, it's the agonizing jolt of cattle prods against sensitive areas. I truly wish I could provide them with answers. I dread what tomorrow, the day after, and the following days might bring. James departed over a month ago. His mutilated body was discovered on a Colombian roadside yesterday. Mark will vanish by day's end. After one final stop, I'll embrace my new identity. I've already dispatched all my belongings to a Denver storage facility, funded anonymously via bank transfer. Linda was escorted in and shackled to the table across from me. She appeared worse for wear. Orange certainly wasn't her color. No makeup, hair slightly unkempt, bags under her eyes. It seemed prison hadn't agreed with her yet. "How are you holding up?" I inquired. "Please, Mark, you've got to help me. I'm innocent," she pleaded. "Linda," I sighed, "there's nothing I can do for you. Besides, we're getting divorced." "Please, Mark, I didn't do it and I don't want a divorce." "Just sign the papers, Linda. It's over," I insisted. "Please, Mark, talk to James. He can help me. We were friends once. Please reach out to him," she implored. "Have you heard from James?" I asked. "No, I kept hoping he'd visit, but he never showed," she replied. "Well, he'll never come now. He was eliminated in Colombia." Her face drained of color in shock. "No, he couldn't have," she protested. "Perhaps he didn't know, but they believed he did. Now, Linda, it's best you sign the divorce papers and move on." "But you're leaving me with nothing," she cried. "You won't need anything here. You'll be here for the next 20 years. Please, Mark, you've got to help me. I can't endure staying here. I need to escape," Linda pleaded. "Please, it's time for me to share a story with you, Linda. Maybe this will shed some light," I replied. "About 5 years back, there was a skilled hacker known as the Ghost. He earned this moniker for his expertise in covering his digital tracks, like an elusive specter infiltrating computer systems. The Ghost embarked on a personal mission to target cartels. Over 30 million was pilfered from one cartel before they enlisted other hackers to hunt down this elusive phantom. Sensing the trackers closing in, the Ghost vanished, leaving no trace behind, and forged a new identity. He ceased all digital activities, except for occasional minor hacks for practice. To those around him, he appeared technologically inept, even to his wife. Yes, he fell in love and married. He cherished his wife deeply. But after 3 years of marriage, he stumbled upon a shocking truth. His wife was unfaithful, maintaining a relationship with her real boyfriend throughout their marriage. To compound matters, he discovered that his wife had married him solely to implicate him in the embezzlement scheme she and her boyfriend were orchestrating. Her eyes widened, and her complexion paled when I recounted their scheme to her. Determined not to let it unfold, the Ghost devised a plan for retribution. He hacked into their devices and work network to gather evidence, shifting the blame away from himself and directly onto his wife. He also ensured her boyfriend would believe she was cheating on him. The ultimate blow for his wife was orchestrating her lover's testimony against her, resulting in her lengthy imprisonment, shattering their hearts as they felt betrayed, much like the phantom felt by his wife, I explained. "You," she exhaled, processing the revelation. "Continue. With his wife taken care of, it was time to pursue her lover. Since the cartel was still hunting the phantom, why not exact revenge and make them believe they finally captured their target?" So, Ghost utilized his wife's lover's computer to pilfer a large sum from the cartel. Unfortunately, Ghost made a small error, leaving a trace back to the boyfriend. Consequently, the cartel traced the hack, leading to the boyfriend. Authorities suspect he endured torture for over a month before succumbing. Regrettably, he lacked the information the cartel sought. None of this is real or substantiated, but I thought this fictional account might help you cope. While I believe you are not entirely guilty as the evidence suggests, you're far from innocent. Just sign the papers. Imagine the repercussions if someone discovers evidence portraying you as an informant. Her face flushed with rage. "You damn fool!" she yelled, lunging towards me. The guards promptly restrained her, securing her to the table with short chains, preventing her from reaching me. As they escorted her away, shrieking, I exited, heading to a cheap, disposable car parked at the mall. Leaving Mark behind, I walked to my true vehicle awaiting me, ready to drive away with my new identity.
Story 4.
It was a Tuesday like any other. I remember it so clearly because, looking back, there wasn't a hint that anything was wrong. I had woken up early, as I usually did, my phone alarm vibrating softly on the nightstand next to me. Emily, my wife, was still asleep beside me, her soft blonde hair spilling over her face. I got up quietly so I wouldn't disturb her, showered, and put on the suit I had laid out the night before. Another day, another work grind. I grabbed my briefcase and headed downstairs. Ethan, our driver, was already waiting for me by the car. He was supposed to take me to the airport. I had a work trip planned, a quick flight to Seattle for a conference. Ethan stood by the car, leaning casually against the driver's side door with his usual air of nonchalance. "Morning, Mr. McAllister," he greeted me, a small smirk playing on his lips. "Morning, Ethan," I responded, barely paying him any attention. I was already thinking about the day ahead: meetings, presentations, and potential clients. The usual. I wasn't the type to notice the little things, not then at least. But now, as I look back, that smirk, the way he looked too comfortable standing there outside my house, it all makes sense. Emily had kissed me goodbye, but it was quick, almost rushed. I didn't think much of it. In hindsight, maybe I should have. The distance between us had been growing lately, but I chalked it up to the stress of work, the long hours, the projects I was buried in. I convinced myself that we were fine. After all, we had everything, didn't we? A nice house, good jobs, a stable life. The drive to the airport was uneventful. Ethan made small talk like he always did, asking about the trip, about work. I responded politely, but my mind was elsewhere, already planning my presentation for the conference. Ethan dropped me off, and I headed inside, mentally preparing for the day. But as fate would have it, the conference got canceled last minute due to some logistical error. My first reaction was frustration. I'd spent weeks prepping for this, and now it was all for nothing. But as I stood there in the airport terminal, part of me was excited to head back home early. I thought Emily would be surprised. I hadn't told her yet that I was coming back early. Maybe we could have dinner, something spontaneous, something to break up the routine. I tried calling Ethan to pick me up, but he didn't answer. Strange, I thought. He always answered. It wasn't like him to disappear like that, especially when he knew I'd be expecting a ride back. I shrugged it off, figuring he was probably running errands or something. So, I grabbed a cab and headed home instead. The ride was uneventful, but I couldn't shake this growing sense of excitement. I thought maybe this could be a turning point, a chance to reconnect with Emily. When I pulled up to the house, something felt off. It was subtle at first. The driveway was empty, which was odd because Ethan should have been back by now. Emily's car was gone too. A slight frown creased my brow, but I brushed it aside. Maybe they'd gone out to run some errands together, which they sometimes did. I opened the front door and stepped inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I called out, "Emily?" No answer. I checked my phone, expecting maybe she'd left me a text or something, but nothing. That's when a thought hit me. Maybe Ethan hadn't answered his phone because he was with her. But that didn't make sense, right? He was just the driver, someone we hired to make our busy lives easier. I shook my head, pushing the ridiculous idea out of my mind. I decided to wait for them to return. I figured they couldn't be far. But after a while, the silence of the house became suffocating. I stepped back outside and noticed something I hadn't before, the faint sound of a car engine idling. It was coming from around the side street near our house. Curious, I started walking in that direction. As I turned the corner, I saw it. My car, parked in a small alley behind the house. The SUV was rocking ever so slightly. For a second, my brain didn't register what I was seeing. I thought maybe something was wrong with the car, that it was malfunctioning. But then, as I got closer, the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. Through the tinted windows, I could see movement, two figures, tangled together, moving in a rhythm I knew all too well. My heart stopped. My stomach dropped. I froze, standing there in disbelief, my mind struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. Emily, my wife, and Ethan, our driver. They were having sex in my car. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching as my entire world crumbled before me. My chest tightened with rage, confusion, and hurt. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind, so trusting? I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed toward the car, my footsteps heavy on the pavement. The closer I got, the angrier I became. By the time I reached the door, I was seething. Without thinking, I yanked the door open. Emily screamed. Ethan looked up, his face pale, his eyes wide with shock and terror. They scrambled, trying to cover themselves, but it was too late. I'd seen everything. I'd caught them in the act. "What the fuck are you doing?" I roared, my voice shaking with rage. I grabbed Ethan by the arm and yanked him out of the car. He stumbled to the ground, naked, his hands up in a pathetic attempt to shield himself. "Ryan, wait," he stammered, but I didn't let him finish. I threw the first punch, and it landed square on his jaw. He crumpled to the ground like the worthless piece of shit he was. I didn't stop. I hit him again, harder this time. I wanted him to feel every bit of pain he'd caused me. I wanted him to suffer. Emily was screaming now, begging me to stop. "Ryan, please, stop. You're going to kill him." Her voice was high-pitched, frantic. But I didn't care. I was past caring. This wasn't just about the betrayal. This was about everything. The lies, the deceit, the fact that I had trusted these people and they had shattered that trust into a million pieces. I stood over Ethan, breathing heavily, my fists bloodied. He was a mess, curled up on the ground, sobbing and gasping for breath. Emily was still crying, her hands trembling as she tried to pull her clothes back on. For a moment, I considered finishing the job, but something in me snapped. This wasn't worth it. They weren't worth it. I took a step back, wiping the sweat from my forehead, trying to calm the storm of emotions raging inside me. Emily, still shaking, crawled toward me. "Ryan, please. I'm sorry. We can fix this. I swear, it didn't mean anything." I looked down at her, disgusted. "Fix this? You think we can fix this?" My voice was low, barely controlled. "You destroyed everything, Emily. You destroyed us." She reached for me, but I pulled away. I couldn't stand the sight of her, the smell of her, the very thought of her. Without another word, I turned and walked back toward the house, my body shaking with adrenaline and anger. I didn't stop until I was inside, slamming the door behind me. I didn't want to hear her voice anymore. I didn't want to see her. As far as I was concerned, she was dead to me. I grabbed my suitcase and started packing. I didn't care where I was going. I just knew I had to get out. The life I thought I had, the marriage I thought I was in, it was all a lie. There was nothing left for me here. As I packed, I could hear Emily outside, still crying, still begging me to come back, to forgive her. But I was done. I had nothing left to say to her. I was walking away, and this time there was no coming back. Once my bag was packed, I headed straight for the door, ignoring her sobs. As I stepped outside, she reached for me again, but I brushed her off, barely sparing her a glance. "It's over, Emily. Don't ever try to contact me again." She collapsed onto the ground, wailing, but I didn't stop. I walked to the curb, called a cab, and waited in silence until it arrived. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me with her tears. Not anymore. As the cab pulled up, I climbed inside and gave the driver an address, a hotel on the other side of town. I needed to get away from all of this, from her, from everything that reminded me of what I had lost. As we drove away, I glanced back at the house one last time. Emily was still there, crumpled on the driveway like a broken doll. And I felt nothing. No pity, no sadness. Just a cold, empty void where my love for her used to be. This was the end of us, and I was okay with that. A year had passed since that day. I had thought about it often, how catching Emily and Ethan in my car shattered my life. In some ways, it felt like a lifetime ago. After the divorce, I moved out of that house and started over. I focused on work, burying myself in projects, deadlines, and meetings. It was easier that way. Work didn't betray you, didn't lie to your face. It gave me structure, control, and that was exactly what I needed after everything. Emily had tried to reach out a few times after the divorce papers were filed. She sent emails, left voicemails, but I ignored them all. There was nothing left to say. I had made it clear when I walked out of that house that day that I wanted nothing more to do with her. One evening, I was sitting in my new apartment, a modest one-bedroom in the city. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. It was peaceful, quiet. I had a beer in hand, the TV on in the background, but I wasn't really watching. My mind often wandered back to that day, to the anger I had felt, the betrayal. It wasn't just that Emily had cheated. It was who she had cheated with. Ethan had been around us for years. I had trusted him. My phone buzzed, breaking my thoughts. It was a text message from Emily. My stomach twisted with frustration. How many times had I told her to leave me alone? I had moved on, or at least I was trying to. I considered deleting it without reading it, but something in me hesitated. We need to talk. It's important. Please. I stared at the screen, debating whether to respond. What could she possibly want now? We were done, our lives separated by a clear line. There was nothing left between us. But curiosity got the better of me. I typed a quick response. What do you want? It didn't take long for her to reply. Can we meet? I'll explain everything in person. I'm not interested in meeting you, Emily. Just say whatever you have to say. There was a pause, a long one this time. I could picture her hesitating on the other end, maybe typing and deleting her response several times. Finally, her next message came through. It's about the child. I sat up straighter, my heart skipping a beat. What child? I typed back, my fingers moving faster than I realized. Our child, Ryan. I'm pregnant. I had the baby a few months ago. We need to talk. My blood ran cold. For a moment, I just stared at the message, my mind reeling. Emily had a baby? And she was trying to tell me it was mine? There was no way. We hadn't been together in over a year, and even before that, our marriage had been rocky, to say the least. There was no way that baby was mine. I called her, my voice low and controlled, but inside, I was burning with anger. Emily, what the hell are you talking about? I demanded as soon as she answered. Ryan, please, she began, her voice shaky. I'm serious. I had a baby, and I believe it's yours. I didn't know how to tell you before, but you have to understand, I didn't mean for this to happen. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You gotta be kidding me. You're saying you had a baby after we split up, and you want me to believe it's mine? After everything you did? I know it sounds crazy, but it's the truth, she pleaded. Please, can we meet and talk about this? I wouldn't be telling you if I didn't think it was important. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing the room. I could hear the desperation in her voice, but I wasn't about to be manipulated again. You think I'm just going to take your word for it? After you cheated on me with Ethan? Ryan, please. I'm telling the truth. I didn't mean for things to happen the way they did, but this baby, it could be yours. How the hell do you even know? You were with him God knows how many times. How do you even know who the father is? There was silence on the other end for a moment, and I could tell she was crying. I just know. I haven't been with anyone else since we split up. Please, Ryan. I'm struggling. I need your help. This baby needs your help. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My hands were shaking, the anger rising in my chest again, but this time it was mixed with something else. Confusion. Doubt. Fine, I said, my voice hard. You want to talk? Let's meet. But don't expect me to believe a word you say until I see some proof. We agreed to meet the next day at a small cafe downtown. It was one of those places we used to go to together back when things were normal before the lies, before everything fell apart. I arrived early, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. What was she playing at? Did she really think I would fall for this? Or was she that desperate? I sat at a corner table, my eyes scanning the street for any sign of her. My hands were clenched into fists, and I had to remind myself to breathe, to keep calm. This was just another manipulation, another game she was trying to play. Then I saw her. She walked in, cradling a small bundle in her arms, a baby, wrapped in a blue blanket. My heart skipped a beat. For a moment, I was frozen in place, unable to move. She looked different, tired, worn out. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. This wasn't the Emily I remembered. She spotted me and walked over, sitting down across from me without a word. The baby was still asleep in her arms, oblivious to the tension between us. You actually brought him, I said, my voice flat. His name is Noah, she whispered, glancing down at the baby. He's 4 months old. I stared at the baby, my mind racing. Could this really be happening? Could this baby actually be mine? You expect me to believe this is my child? I asked, my voice cold. After everything? I know it's hard to believe, but I swear, Ryan, I haven't been with anyone else since we split. I made mistakes, I know that. But this is different. I shook my head, still in disbelief. So, what do you want from me? Why now? Why are you telling me this after all this time? Because I need help, she said, her voice breaking. I'm struggling, Ryan. I can't do this on my own. I thought I could, but it's too hard. No one needs his father. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. And you're sure he's mine? She nodded, tears filling her eyes. I'm sure. I wouldn't have come to you if I wasn't. I didn't say anything for a moment, my mind racing. I didn't trust her, not after everything that had happened. But what if she was telling the truth? What if this baby was mine? I couldn't just walk away from that. We'll do a DNA test, I said, finally, my voice firm. If he's mine, I'll do what I have to. But I'm not taking your word for it, Emily. Not after everything. She nodded, wiping away a tear. I understand. I'll do whatever you need. I just want what's best for Noah. The next few days were a blur. We arranged for the DNA test, and I found myself in a strange limbo waiting for the results, trying to make sense of everything. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was still angry, still hurt by what Emily had done. But another part of me couldn't shake the thought that this baby might be mine. I tried to keep busy, throwing myself into work, but it was impossible to focus. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Noah's face. I couldn't help but wonder what if. A few days later, I got the call. The results were in. I picked up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest as I waited for the words that would change everything. It's negative, the voice on the other end said. I blinked, not sure I had heard correctly. What? The DNA test is negative. The baby isn't yours. Relief washed over me, followed by a wave of anger. She had lied. Again. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking with rage. How could she do this to me? How could she put me through all of this, knowing the baby wasn't mine? I called her immediately, my voice shaking with fury. Emily, what the hell is wrong with you? The baby isn't mine. You lied to me. Again. There was silence on the other end of the line, and then she started crying. Ryan, please, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought. You thought what? I snapped. That you could drag me back into your mess? That you could manipulate me into taking care of a child that isn't mine? I didn't mean to. I don't care what you meant. I interrupted, my voice rising. You've done enough damage, Emily. You've lied. You've cheated. And now you try to pawn off some other guy's kid on me? What kind of person does that? She was sobbing now, and for a second, I almost felt bad. Almost. But the anger inside me burned too hot. This wasn't just a mistake, this was manipulation. She had dragged me into her mess, trying to tie me down with a lie. And for what? Sympathy? Money? Ryan, please, she choked out between sobs. I didn't know what else to do. I'm all alone. Ethan left me, and I have no one. I thought maybe you'd want to help. Help? I spat, gripping the phone tighter. After everything you did to me? You want me to clean up your mess after you betrayed me? I'm sorry, she cried, her voice desperate. I'm sorry for everything, but I didn't know it would turn out like this. I didn't know I'd be left with nothing. Her words were cutting through the phone, but they didn't reach me. I wasn't going to be sucked back into her world of lies. Not again. I'm done with you, Emily, I said coldly. You're not my responsibility anymore. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. Don't ever contact me again. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking with the intensity of the moment. My mind was spinning, trying to process the reality of what had just happened. She had tried to trap me with a baby that wasn't mine. For a moment, I had almost believed her, almost been pulled back into her web of manipulation. But now it was over. I had the proof I needed. I sank down into the couch, running my hands over my face. This whole situation had left me drained, emotionally spent. But now at least I had some closure. The baby wasn't mine. I didn't have to deal with her lies anymore. I could finally move on, or so I thought. 2 days passed without a word from Emily. I assumed that she had finally gotten the message, that she would leave me alone now that the DNA test had come back negative. But then, on the third day, there was a knock at my door. It was late past 10 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I approached the door cautiously, peeking through the peephole. And there she was, standing on my doorstep, cradling the baby in her arms again. My stomach twisted with a mix of anger and dread. What was she doing here? I had made it clear that I wanted nothing more to do with her. I yanked open the door, my expression hard. What the hell do you want, Emily? I demanded, my voice sharp. She looked up at me, her face pale and streaked with tears. Ryan, please. I need you to help me. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my anger in check. I told you. I'm done. That baby isn't mine. There's nothing more to talk about. She shook her head, her voice trembling. I know, but I don't have anywhere else to go. I don't have anyone else. Ethan's gone. My family won't help me. I'm at the end of my rope, Ryan. I don't know what to do. I felt a flicker of sympathy, but it was quickly snuffed out by the memory of all the lies. She had made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. That's not my problem, I said coldly. You made your choices, Emily. You chose to cheat on me. You chose to lie. Now you have to deal with the consequences. She bit her lip, her eyes filling with fresh tears. Ryan, please. Just for the baby's sake. He's innocent in all this. He didn't ask for any of this. I glanced down at the baby Noah. She had called him. He was sleeping, completely unaware of the chaos surrounding him. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of something guilt, maybe, or pity, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't my responsibility. I'm not getting involved, I said firmly. That's final. Emily's face crumpled, and before I could react, she stepped forward, placing the baby carrier on the ground in front of me. I can't do this, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I can't take care of him. I'm leaving him with you. My heart stopped. What? Before I could process what was happening, she turned and bolted down the steps, running toward a waiting car. I shouted after her, but it was too late. The car sped off, leaving me standing in the doorway, dumbfounded, with a baby in front of me. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the baby, my mind racing. I couldn't believe what had just happened. Emily had just abandoned her child, left him on my doorstep like it was nothing. I looked down at Noah, who was still asleep, completely unaware of the chaos that had just unfolded. What the hell was I supposed to do now? I bent down, picking up the baby carrier and bringing it inside. I set it on the kitchen table, my mind still spinning. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. She couldn't just leave her baby here and run off. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my fingers trembling as I punched in the numbers. When the dispatcher picked up, I explained the situation as calmly as I could, though my voice was shaking with disbelief. My ex-wife just abandoned her baby on my doorstep, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's not my child. I need help. The dispatcher assured me that they would send someone over immediately, and within minutes, the police arrived. I let them in, still reeling from the shock of what had just happened. One of the officers, a woman with kind eyes, immediately went to check on the baby, while the other began asking me questions. So, you're saying this isn't your child? The officer asked, scribbling notes on his pad. I shook my head. No. We did a DNA test. It came back negative. This isn't my kid. My ex-wife just showed up and left him here. Do you know where she went? The officer asked. No, I said, my frustration bubbling to the surface. She ran off. I don't know where she went. The officer nodded, jotting down more notes. We'll file a report and start looking for her. In the meantime, we'll contact Child Protective Services to take custody of the baby. I felt a wave of relief at that. At least they were handling it. I didn't want to get sucked into Emily's mess any more than I already had. The next 2 days were tense. The police were on the lookout for Emily, and CPS had taken Noah into temporary custody. I tried to put it all behind me, to move on with my life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Then I got a call from the police. They had found Emily. She had been hiding out in a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, barely scraping by. When they brought her in, she was a mess, disheveled, exhausted, and barely coherent. Apparently, after Ethan had bailed on her, she had spiraled into a downward spiral of bad decisions, ending up with no money, no support, and no options. The police charged her with child abandonment, and she was facing jail time. When I heard the news, I wasn't surprised. This was the end result of all her lies and manipulation. She had destroyed everything around her, and now she was paying the price. A week later, I received another call, this time from CPS. They wanted to update me on the situation with Noah. I assumed they were calling to let me know that he had been placed with a foster family, but what they told me instead caught me off guard. We conducted another paternity test, the caseworker explained over the phone. Just to be sure? And I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. The test came back negative just as the first one did. Noah is not your biological child. I breathed a sigh of relief, but then the caseworker continued. However, given the circumstances of his abandonment, we're seeking a permanent placement for him. We wanted to offer you the opportunity to take him in, as you were the last person he was left with. I froze, the weight of the situation crashing down on me. This baby wasn't mine. I didn't know him anything, but the thought of him being bounced around in the foster system, without anyone to care for him, I'll need to think about it, I said finally, my voice quiet. And for the first time since this nightmare had started, I wasn't sure what the right decision was anymore. I watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across my quiet street. For the first time in what felt like ages, I could breathe. Emily was gone, taken into custody for abandoning the child at my doorstep and for all the other lies she had built up over the years. I had done my part. I had called the police the moment she left Noah, and now they had caught her. Justice was on its way. It wasn't long after that frantic night when the authorities contacted me to let me know they'd apprehended Emily. There was a strange sense of satisfaction, a kind of twisted relief that came with knowing she wouldn't be able to ruin more lives, at least not from behind bars. I hadn't cared what happened to her for a while now, but hearing that the police had found her made me feel like I had won, like I was finally free. Emily had made her choices. Now she had to live with the consequences. A few days after her arrest, I got another call from the police. Mr. Parker, we've apprehended your ex-wife, Emily Parker, and she's being charged with child abandonment, the officer said, his tone firm and professional. She'll be in custody until the trial, and given the severity of her actions, it's likely she'll be serving time. Hearing those words, serving time, brought a strange, bitter smile to my face. Emily had always managed to slip away from the consequences of her actions, but not this time. Not after everything she'd done. What about the child? I asked. Noah. I couldn't bring myself to call him my child anymore. Not after everything I'd learned. It wasn't his fault, but I couldn't be responsible for him either. The officer paused before responding. The child has been taken to a temporary foster care facility. CPS will be handling the process of placing him into a more permanent situation. I let out a long breath. It was over. Noah would be taken care of by someone better suited for the task, someone who could give him the love and stability he deserved. And Emily was finally out of my life for good. A week later, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the remnants of my morning coffee, my thoughts swirling. The house was quiet, eerily so, but that was how I liked it. No more drama, no more lies, no more chaos. Just peace. I had thought about Noah more than I wanted to admit, but in the end, I knew I had made the right decision. Taking him in wasn't something I could do. He wasn't my responsibility, and as harsh as it might seem, he wasn't my child. Emily had tried to manipulate me, to drag me back into her twisted world, but I hadn't let her. I had stood firm, and now I was free. There was a knock on the door. I stood up, crossing the room to answer it. When I opened the door, a woman from CPS stood there, holding a clipboard. Her expression was neutral, but there was something in her eyes that told me she had news. Mr. Parker, she said, nodding politely. I wanted to update you on the situation with Noah. I stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. She sat down at the table, flipping through the papers on her clipboard. Noah has been placed in a foster home, she explained. He's doing well considering the circumstances, and we're working on finding him a permanent family. He's in good hands. I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and something else, something I couldn't quite name. It was strange to feel so detached from the situation after everything that had happened, but at the same time, I knew it was for the best. And Emily? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She's been formally charged with child abandonment and endangerment, the CPS worker replied, her voice matter of fact. She'll likely be facing a prison sentence. Hearing that made something inside me settle. Emily would finally be held accountable for her actions. She couldn't run from the truth anymore. and she couldn't manipulate anyone else, at least not for a long time. The CPS worker stood up, offering me a small, polite smile. "Thank you for your cooperation throughout this process, Mr. Parker. If you have any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out." I nodded, showing her to the door. Once she was gone, I closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. It was really over now. The chapter with Emily had been shut, locked, and sealed away. Emily's trial came and went. I didn't attend. I didn't need to be there to know the outcome. She had abandoned her child, tried to pin him on me, and now she was paying the price. The sentence came back swift and severe: 5 years in prison for child abandonment, neglect, and fraud. I heard about it through the news, and though I didn't want to admit it, I felt satisfied. Emily had destroyed our marriage, had tried to ruin my life, and now she was the one locked away, with no way to manipulate anyone anymore. I never received another letter from her. I never visited, never called, and I certainly never responded to any inquiries from her lawyer. She was gone from my life, and that was exactly how I wanted it. As for Noah, I sometimes thought about him, wondered where he ended up, but I had made my decision. He would find a family who could love him, care for him, and give him the life he deserved. I wasn't that person. My life was my own again, and I wasn't about to get dragged into another spiral of chaos. The seasons changed, and life moved on. The house felt emptier than it had before, but it was a good kind of empty. Peaceful. Quiet. I had finally found my footing again, free from the weight of the past that had dragged me down for so long. One evening, as I sat on the back porch, watching the sun set behind the trees, I reflected on everything that had happened. Emily was gone, locked away in a prison cell where she belonged. The chaos she had brought into my life had been dealt with, and now I was free. I had survived the storm she had unleashed. I had come out the other side, scarred but stronger. And now, with her out of the picture, I could finally move on. The future was mine to shape, and this time, I wouldn't let anyone else tear it apart.